in sympathy and recognition of the people affected by the tornadoes. I know we have our own brand of disasters here in El Dorado County, but there's other parts of the country that suffer as well. So please join me in the pledge and a moment of silence. Comment.
If members of the public would like to address the board during any public comment period, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to actually, we do have one member of the public wishing to speak, and we're asking for public comment on the adoption of today's agenda. So let's see. I think that he wants to speak at a later time and not necessarily on the adoption of the agenda because he has lowered his hand.
Okay, good, thank you. So we'll vote on the agenda.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Next item up is nomination and election. I'll just say that it was been my pleasure to serve as the board president for a year. This last year, I think we've done some really good things. I like the teamwork and the focus on our mission, and so it's going to be a privilege to hand that off. Having said that, I will nominate Director Anzini to be our next president.
Second that.
Actually, typically, we take nomination of board president and vice president in one motion. If you choose to make a nomination of both, if you'd like just to do one, you can do that too.
Director Osborne.
It would give me great pleasure to nominate Mr. Veerkamp as our vice president.
Thank you. Are you both willing to serve?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's an auspicious, meeting,
Okay, so for the record, we got two motions going here. We have a motion by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Veerkamp to nominate Lori Anzini as president of the board. Then we have a second motion by Director Osborne to nominate Director Veerkamp as vice president. So I'm assuming that we're taking two separate motions, so we need a second for Director Osborne's motion.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll call for board comment and then public comment, and then we will take the board president motion first.
Okay, so board comments? None?
I think this is an internal thing with the board, doesn't take public comment, does it?
Just in the past, it's the president's prerogative, and for full transparency, we always
Sure,
like
I
to
think-
ask for.
We'll allow public comment.
Okay, just to be clear, this is a public comment period for the nomination and election of the board president and vice president, and we are taking public comment on both motions at this time.
Thank you. My last job as president, I almost goofed it up.
President Dwyer, it does not appear that we have any members of the public wishing to speak on the nomination and election of board president and vice president. We have a motion made by Director Dwyer, seconded by Director Veerkamp, to nominate and elect Director Anzini as president. Would you like to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
It is with great pleasure I pass to you the scepter,
Thank
or
you.
whatever that
And tell him to move his car out of your parking spot.
is.
It's easier to park up front.
Actually,
I left it open for her today.
Yeah.
Okay, as we move forward, President Anzini, would you like to call for the vote for the nomination and election of board vice president, moved by Director Osborne, seconded by Director Day, of Director Brian Veerkamp as vice president?
Yes.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Communications.
This is under employee recognition. We actually received an email from a customer, a neighbor of ours, and since we have a lot of assets throughout the district, I thought this would be appropriate. An EID, a neighbor of ours, sent appreciation for the district in response to a neighborly gesture to adjust some lights away from his home because it was shining in his home. It was, he was so grateful for us to be able to do that so he can enjoy his backyard. And we did it just as a neighborly gesture and didn't affect operations at all. So we do try and be a good neighbor to folks that are near our facilities. That concludes the report.
Thank you. We now move to public comment.
We do have a member of the public wishing to speak.
Just a reminder that this is for anything that's not on the agenda. Thanks.
Mr. McKinney?
Thank you. Good morning. I wanted to speak briefly on a topic that is a continuation in the vein of being good neighbors. I'm the general manager of the Amador Water Agency to your south. And weekend before last, the weekend of the 4th and 5th of December, we had a customer who reported leakage coming up through a gravel road in a fairly remote area of our upcountry portion of our service area. And when we looked into it, it was along the alignment of our gravity supply line, which is our only feed for raw water to our upcountry Central Amador Water Project, several thousand customers. The GSL at that point is a 20-inch ductile iron pipe, and because it's only 5 or 6 years old, we prioritized it low as far as repair pieces, and we didn't have any of that type of pipe available. And we were looking at having to shut down an entire water system over the weekend because of this leak. But my operations manager, Rick Ferreira, who lives in El Dorado County and has worked there, knew some people. He contacted Noel Russell at EID and asked for any assistance that could be provided. EID had appropriate pipe and help available and actually sent people and pipe in our direction while we were trying to figure out what the problem was. Fortunately, it turned out that once we excavated and identified the problem, it wasn't the GSL pipe itself. The problem was an unmapped, unknown, and not to spec connection that had been made to the pipe for service in the future that wasn't being used, and it was leaking. We were able to repair that ourselves and turn your folks around and send them home. They probably felt like it was a fool's errand, but we were very happy to have the assistance, and if it had been anything more serious, it would have been absolutely essential. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for you guys being the best neighbors there are. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And I just want to, for the record, that was not authorized when I was the GM there, that connection. So just want to make the record straight. And you're very welcome.
2015.
It's always good to hear from our neighbors, and thank you very much for the compliment. Our staff is always willing to help our neighbors.
Thank
Are there
you.
any other public comments?
President Zini, at this time, it does not appear that there are any members of the public wishing to speak on items not on today's agenda.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to communications.
Under the general manager report, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. How about clerk of the board
None today, thank you.
and board of directors? Yes, Director Dwyer.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure and honor to announce that through a team effort spearheaded by Jennifer, initiated by me, and spearheaded by Jennifer, we and the senior staff created a nomination package to the Regional Water Authority for an award for the general manager, a Distinguished Service Award. And last Thursday night, the award was presented to Jim Abercrombie, and out of many candidates, he was selected. So we're very proud to have him receive the award, and it reflects great credit upon himself and the entire organization. So thank you, Jim. Here's the award. End of report.
Speak to me. That's it? Oh,
Oh, well, wait.
okay. Wait a minute. Director Osborne?
Just a brief report. The unofficial rain gauge at Camino was 1.45 inches as of 7 o'clock this morning, and still coming down, and we are prepared for snow tonight, so.
All right. Director Veerkamp?
Yeah, thank you very much. LAFCO met on December 1st, and actually, we met also on the 17th of the Strategic Planning Committee. The Strategic Planning Committee is reviewing the work plan for the upcoming year as well as budget. Ex-Supervisor Shiva Frenson is assisting with budget development from all her years of experience with LAFCO and in the absence of an executive officer right now. So she is contracted and consulting with us on that. We have another strategic planning this Wednesday in the afternoon. There still is the open commissioner's spot based on lack of a quorum, but maybe that'll change daily. They're still coming in, the votes are coming in slow. And we are beginning the search for an executive officer as well. So, end of report.
Thank you. Director Day?
No, just to piggyback on George's unofficial rain gauge at the unofficial Acorn report. It's not been looking good, but I hope that this week's rain and hopefully future rain, belies that. But right now, at least the local acorns down in El Dorado Hills, the native ones, are not expecting a lot of rain this winter.
Well, I use the squirrel report and what they're doing to the pine cones. And it's kind of a moderate digest this year. They're not, not as heavy as some years and not as light as others, but this is a scientific issue,
Yeah.
Ann, are you paying attention to all this?
So getting elected, you have to count the squirrels and acorns in your neighborhood. Okay. Part of the deals of being a director. Okay, we're going to move on to approval of the consent calendar. Any action items that need to be pulled? Now is your opportunity to speak. No? Okay,
I'll
well,
move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
all right. This is an opportunity for public input on any of the items that are on the consent calendar.
President Zini, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay. If there's no more comments, here we have an opportunity to vote, so.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is our workshop. So we'll move forward.
Good morning, President Manzini. It's
Yes.
a pleasure to say that, and Vice President Veerkamp and the rest of the board. It's a pleasure to be here. Brian Polson, General Counsel. I'm going to provide this morning an update on the district's ongoing process to redraw our division boundaries, otherwise known as the redistricting process. Obviously, a process that many, if not all, of the local public agencies, including governmental entities, cities, and counties, are engaged in at this time as well. If you'll go to the next slide, Jen. The board last adopted its current division boundaries in 2011 after the 2010 federal census. Following 2020, the release of the 2020 census, the district is engaged in that process. I last updated the board on this in May, and that was, of course, prior to our receiving any of the federal census data, which we've now received and I'll be talking about today. Next slide. So to summarize briefly today's presentation, recall that the district must ensure that its division boundaries are consistent with federal and state law regarding distribution, representation, and distribution of our division populations. The district staff have now received and adapted the 2020 federal census data into the district's division boundaries, and given the having done that work now, it's evident that the district needs to adjust some of its boundaries in order to ensure that each of its divisions is equally represented. Next slide. So we received the federal census data in September. Recall that this was later than is statutorily required, but that was because the data was delayed as a result of COVID and other related challenges. Just an update on timing, the district's next election is in November 2022, where divisions 2 and 4 will be potentially be on the ballot. Existing law, the Elections Code, Section 22,000, requires that no changes to the division boundaries can be made prior to 180 days of the next election. What that means is that under existing law, May 12th would be our deadline to make changes. Unfortunately, and that was probably doable for us even with the delayed release of the federal data, but unfortunately, for other special districts and government entities like cities and counties that have elections in June, for example, their deadline for completing redistricting was much earlier, November of 2021 in certain instances. And so clearly, there just wasn't enough time for those entities to be able to complete redistricting by November, given that the federal census data wasn't released until September. Lots of entities went to the California legislature for temporary relief, and the legislature was sympathetic. The problem with just pushing out the deadline, however, for conducting redistricting was that it created a scenario in which the county registrar's election departments were going to be crushed with a ton of data and information coming in with very little time to process that and get ballots prepared in time for the June election. So what happened was a little bit of a compromise. The legislature enacted a new temporary deadline for all special districts and local agencies, and that new deadline is April 17th, 2022. That's a substantial amount of additional time for the entities whose deadline was otherwise November, but unfortunately for us, it's a little bit of a shortened timeline since we had about another month under existing law. I'm still confident that we'll be able to complete the process, and I'm going to go into today sort of where we're at now and where we anticipate going. But I wanted you to be aware because when I gave my presentation in May, I indicated that our deadline was May of 2022, and that deadline has since been shortened slightly. Next slide, please. So having received and analyzed the federal census data, the district staff identified 41 census tracts that intersect with the district's boundaries. Recall, I talked about this in May, that a tract is the census data is made up of tracts and blocks are smaller subsets of tracts. Each tract in our case had about an average of about 61 blocks. So we're talking a lot of small geographic entities to look at, and each block contains unique demographic and population data. For example, a block might show a population of 6, one block, and then a neighboring block might have a population of 60 or 160. So each block is very unique in terms of its population, and what it represents is an approximation of the population that exists within that area. The reason that the federal census goes down to the block level and each block is so unique is really to preserve privacy. The federal, there's a substantial privacy interest in citizen population not to have their information specifically identified. And so the government doesn't undertake to tell us exactly how many people live in every single household. Instead, they identify blocks, small geographic areas that provide an approximation of the population and the demographic information of that block. Having looked at each of the blocks, the district identified 654 blocks that are partially within and partially outside of the district service area. And this is because the blocks do not correspond precisely with the district's boundaries. If they did, this would be a much easier and much faster process, but unfortunately they do not. And so it fell upon the district staff to analyze each one of these blocks and make a determination about how much of the block's population to include within the district's division and how much to include outside, or how much to exclude, I should say. So I've got some figures here, or some pictures here, maps to show you, to sort of explain this a little bit better. This is a picture that shows the district's entire service area divided by division, and it doesn't come through all that well with this lighting, but the division boundary is outlined in a black dashed line, and within, the population within the boundary is sort of a darker gray compared to the lighter gray that's outside the division boundary. All of the red lines that you see on this map are the federal census blocks. So you can see a lot of blocks included within the district's service area. If you go to the next slide, here's an example of just zoomed in really close now on part of the service area that shows how the block lines do not correspond precisely with the division boundary lines. So sort of at the top and middle of the screen, there's a polygon that's lighter gray, and everything around it is darker gray. The lighter gray part is not within the district service area. This is sort of like an island not served by the district. Everything around it is served by the district. But those red lines kind of come in and out and around, and so you can see that for each one of those red, shaped polygons, the district has to look at and identify how many parcels are within that block, how many of those parcels are developed versus not, and look at other information as well to be able to make the best and most accurate determination as to how much of the population to include. So that's just kind of the work that we've been doing over the course of the last couple of months since we received the population data. President Dwyer.
Yes, Brian, I have a question. For the blocks that are partially in and partially out, how does the registrar of voters create a ballot for that census block? Do they include everyone within the block, whether they're in the district or not? Is it determined by,
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to it. I suspect, though, that recall that the registrar of voters will send a ballot to an individual, a registered voter, and that individual has an accompanying address and parcel. So they're dealing with information that's much more specific than the census actually, because keep in mind, the census deals in blocks. So, you know, I can't answer that question exactly, but I presume that the registrar has the appropriate information to identify which, you know, whether that parcel is included or not included in the districts. Now, when the district accepts property into its service area, and the board adopts a resolution on annexation and identifies at that point in time which division that parcel will be allocated to, and then we notify the registrar of voters. So that would be additional information that I would assume the registrar would take into account.
Brian, I think you're absolutely correct. That's why the Registrar of Voters cringes about the deadline. Because they have to figure out quickly where the ins and outs are.
us, but for all the other
Absolutely, that makes their job difficult.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. So I'm happy to report that the work of analyzing each of the 654 blocks that are partially within and without is complete. And based on that work, the district has concluded that the federal census identifies 132,206 persons within the district's service area. Divided by 5, that number, or that equates to 26,441. In other words, the target population now for each of the district's divisions will be 26,441. That will be the number that we try to allocate as closely as possible to each of the division boundaries as we start to redraw lines. As we expected, most of the growth within the district service area occurred, you know, between 2010 and 2020 occurred within divisions 2 and 5. El Dorado Hills, where we've seen a lot of development in recent years. Next slide, please. So here's a table that reflects a little bit more detail on what we found based upon our analyzing the federal census data. The first column are the divisions. The second column is the population that existed in each of the divisions, after the district adopted its divisions in 2011. So that was the population after we redrew the lines in 2011, based upon the 2010 population data. And then the third column, or the column right there in the middle, is what the 2020 census population is for each of our existing division boundaries. Then you can see how much each grew. As I said, 2 and 5 stand out. The total percentage within each division is reflected on the second column from the right. And then finally, the deviation from our target is represented in the far column. So this is where, you know, you can see in Division 1, we're going to have to increase the population by, you know, roughly 1,500 or 1,600. In Division 2, we're going to have to decrease the population by about 2,200 persons. So that's the work that's cut out, that we've got cut out for us moving forward. Director Osborne.
It's obviously been 10 years since we went through this exercise before, but there's a percentage that you're allowed to deviate from, instead of being 100% every division, and I forget what that percentage is. If I think it was like 3% or something like that. Is that still right?
Actually, Director Osborne, there's no percentage of deviation defined by law.
Oh, okay.
Instead, the legal standard requires that the divisions be equal in population. So what that means is, of course, subject to interpretation. I've seen various numbers used in different locales. If you look at the population, where the second column that says 2010 population, these were the adopted populations of the division boundaries, and those numbers are less than 1% deviation from one another. That was the target that was used in 2011, was 1%, and I would expect that we would endeavor to utilize the same deviation percentage as well. And you can see that if you look at the second column from the left, That's the column that shows what our existing deviation is. And those numbers are only about 3%. I mean, at the, between 19 and 22%. So we currently have about a 3% deviation from one division to the next. We can do better than that, and we will. So we'll aim for 1% or less to give us the most accurate division of population.
Any other questions?
Next slide. So this is just a visual representation of the district's current division boundaries separated by color with their existing populations overlaid. So, moving forward then, just a brief recap on what our objective is. Federal law, the Federal Voting Rights Act, requires that the division population be approximately equally distributed throughout this, among the divisions. And then the second, so that's what we refer to as equal population. And then the second component is what I call the anti-discrimination component. This is the part of the Voting Rights Act that prohibits political division lines from being drawn in such a way that it imposes racial, ethnic, or linguistic impediments to a citizen's right to vote. If you go to the next slide, just as an example of some of the information that we will consider to ensure that we're meeting that second standard, the anti-discrimination standard, here's some data taken from the county at large. It's the federal census data for the county at large, and this shows a breakdown of I'm just using this as one example, but a breakdown of the Hispanic or Latino population within the county, which, as you can see there, is about 13, almost 14% of the population within the county. And then the non-Hispanic or Latino population, about 86%. Now, again, this is countywide, so this would include South Lake Tahoe. But I show you this just as an example of the kind of information that we'll want to consider. So you can expect that at the next meeting that we come back, we'll at that point in time have a visual representation of where the distribution is of the county's largest ethnicities. I don't anticipate that this will create any extreme difficulty for us in terms of drawing our maps, because my recollection from the 2011 redistricting was that the populations that are reflected on this table were fairly evenly distributed throughout the district. There was no, for example, central location for one ethnicity versus another, which would have created an additional challenge for how to make sure that we were meeting the federal requirements under the Voting Rights Act. Okay, so other factors that the district must consider under its board policies and also under the state elections code criteria are topography, geography, cohesiveness, continuity, integrity, and compactness of territory, along with communities of interest within each division. So what all of that means is I mean, that's a little bit of a mouthful, and we'll get further into what each of these things mean. But for example, topography and geography, those are pretty straightforward. I mean, we'll utilize, we'll look at whether or not rivers or streams or water bodies might create logical boundary lines. We'll look at roads and infrastructure and whether or not those kinds of things create logical boundary lines. We'll look at communities, community service districts, and the county political divisions and so forth, all as inputs into how we might consider most appropriately dividing the district's divisions. Next slide is an example, I believe, of some further information that I just kind of referred to, major roads and networks. The district's own service territories, for example, the wastewater service territories, the recycled water territories, water, of course. So those will all be inputs that we'll consider as we draw the boundary lines. Next slide. This is a map of just here again, just an example. This is the El Dorado Hills Community Services District map, including their future service areas. So this might be, you know, an input that we look at. We might want to look at a map that shows what the existing Community Service District boundaries are and how they might relate to the district's current boundaries. You know, that one in particular may not have been the best example because El Dorado Hills is where most of our, you know, is where the most densely populated area is, and we might not be able to simply follow the El Dorado Hills CSD service area as one division. It would just be too populated, but it's something that we'll consider. And here's just a depiction of the wastewater collection system area served by each of the major wastewater treatment plants. Next slide. So just very briefly on our public outreach to date, the district has created a dedicated page on the website. I've shown the link to it there. That website has announcements about, for example, workshops like this. It has maps of the existing division boundaries, and other resources that the public might find interesting, linked to that part of the website. Next page. We have also developed a press release in draft form, and we anticipate releasing after today's meeting, that is just a further, you know, announcement that the district is engaged in redistricting. Public input is highly desired and sought, and directing folks toward how they might be able to get engaged. Beyond that, I'm sorry, Jen, if you could go back one. We are continuing, as I mentioned, to gather and analyze demographic information, such as the inputs the secondary inputs that I talked about. And we'll begin to start to prepare map alternatives that we anticipate bringing to the board at the next workshop. I'm aiming for January, probably the second meeting in January for our next workshop. That'll leave us time in February for at least one, if not both meetings, and as well as March, where we will have 2 meetings as well. My hope is that we can get it done in March. I believe we have 1 meeting currently. I'd have to look at the calendar, but we do have April, as I said, April 17th is our deadline. So.
Okay.
And with that, that concludes my presentation.
Any questions? Thank you very much. We have a question.
Well, just a comment more than a question, that I would encourage that in going through this, hopefully you're through the hardest part, because it's just collating and getting all the information together. But taking a look at not just subtracting and adding specifically, so like for instance, my district, it's going to have to shrink, so to speak. But look at cleaning up some of the stuff from 2011, you know, like off Salmon Falls Road, which is very much in El Dorado Hills, and ended up getting stuck in Division 3, I think. They have no connection to the Division 3. Little cleanups like that. Yeah. You know, obviously a lot of the growth is going to be, and changes are going to be down around the south of 50 and all of that development there, and the 3 districts that kind of come together through there. But I would just encourage to look at cleaning up little areas like that as well.
Yeah, and that's excellent input. That's the kind of input that I think, you know, staff will really benefit from, you know, hearing from all of you, particularly when we start to present mapping alternatives. I'll tell you that particular part of the district service area was a bit of a challenge because there are, you know, the lines up there they're not intuitive. There are a lot of islands, you know, that we're having to analyze up there that are not served by the district's area. So yeah, there are little pockets like that that we, you know, that are gonna require a little bit more creativity than others. But I look forward to getting the board's input when we start to really move lines around.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much, Brian, for the presentation. And this is for the public to realize that we're going to have a workshop on this public forum, maybe in the end of January. Okay, moving on. Information.
Public comment.
Oh, sorry.
This is a time for public comment on workshop item on update on reapportioning district divisions. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on to workshop item number 9.
All right, now we'll move on to the second workshop item, number 11. And I'm sure that everybody's looking forward to this report.
Unfortunately, my presentation was done before the squirrels, and I don't have any appropriate slides, not incorporated into our model yet. So. Okay. All right. Good morning, President Anzini, Vice President Bierkamp. Good morning. My name is Dan Corkin, Operations Director. We have 3 topics for you this morning, and we'll probably spend most of the time on the latter 2. So we're going to talk about just kind of a wrap up to 2021, the fall storm response, and then looking ahead into 2022. Next slide, please. Okay, just a quick summary of issues. As we're all aware, drought conditions, irrespective of the weather outside today, as a whole continue to prevail across the state. In the fall, our customers did an outstanding job. We definitely exceeded the 15% requested by the board this summer, due in part to improved weather conditions and increased awareness of ongoing drought conditions. The storms were definitely a welcome change, gave us a little boost in our storage, but as I'll talk to, they did present a few challenges to operations, and will likely continue to do that going forward. And then looking at some of the long-term forecasts, we should be prepared for similar conditions through the rest of this winter. Next slide, please. Okay, so just in terms of the actual numbers for this fall, year over year, now when you only take single years, you definitely have a heavy influence on weather, but see our demand was down quite precipitously, 24 and 31% over the past 2 months.
Good.
We don't yet have the numbers for the overall Sacramento region for November, but we did outpace the rest of the region in October. They were about 17% as a whole. You'll see a slide on that. And then looking at overall conservation since the board's request at the end of June for the stage 1 water alert, we stand about 6% year to date. Slightly higher in recycled water just simply because it's easier to save water outside. So, next slide, please. So, and I'll talk to the colors for those folks online. So this is a 5-year comparison, and then we also throw in 2013 here. These are monthly demand numbers. The 2021 is our red, is our current year demand. As you can see, the 2 blues and the green and the yellow are our prior 4 years of demand. And we definitely outpaced our spring demand earlier this year very heavily, up to almost 40%. And then we made a real hard pivot. As you can see, by the time we got to mid to late summer, we definitely have gotten back to 2020 and actually gone down below 2020 for the latter part of this year. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is our slide provided by the Regional Water Authority, just showing overall as a region how the greater Sacramento region's done, with the current year being the orange in this slide. So you can see we've outpaced them by a little bit. We'd like to remain a little ahead there. So next slide, please. And then these are the slides that our staff provide to the state board on a weekly time step. So I just provided the most recent available 2 slides. Same data, kind of parsed a little bit differently. So I like using monthly demands. When you have weekly, you can see definitely the influence of temperature and precipitation. But as you can see, you definitely see that big change this fall, significant decrease in fall demand. Next slide. Same thing for recycled water. Next slide. Sorry, Jen, I'm keeping her busy with the mouse there. Okay. So one of the most positive things to talk about since my last update is definitely have provided a much different picture to end the year carryover in Jenkinson Lake. Earlier this summer, when or I should say at the beginning of the summer, when we saw our spring demands and what we were anticipating a very dry fall, we were anticipating to be probably around 16,000, maybe a little bit less. When I came to you last, we were at 17,000. That was the end of October. And then these 2 storms in late October, early November, and even setting aside actually this week's storm, because as you know, this analysis prior to the storm, We were sitting at 22,000 for January 1. So that'll continue to go up in our next update. Next slide, please. There's our famous charts here, and I just call out the red is our 2021, and as you can see, remember we talked about we were always planning very conservatively for a very dry fall to show that slope continuing. See, we've definitely leveled off, and actually I expect that dotted line into December to actually, the slope to actually be positive, so actually increase storage. So very, very favorable Q4 of 2021.
So I have one question. If people are looking at that bottom blue line, those days I remember well. That was a real severe drought that we had for a couple of years.
It
So,
was.
yeah.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't continue to call out the benefits of Hazel Creek Tunnel. So
Right.
again, as we mentioned earlier this year, we moved 8,000 acre feet, providing a much different destiny for 2022.
Good.
I'd also just like to add in, our staff's diligently working on adding additional points of diversion for permit 2112, which we could then, if you look at the red line, the 2021 projected, if those additional points of diversion were obtained, we could actually move that line up quite a bit. So in my mind, for the county's sake, that's one of the highest priorities for our community is get that permit 2112 point of diversion change accomplished.
Yeah, it'd give us greater resiliency and flexibility.
Definitely great points. And as the board recalls, Jenkinson Lake is the only supply that can feed every district customer, and that treatment plant never goes off. So this is our workhorse, our lifeblood, or we have lots of different names for it, but it's a very important facility. So next slide, please. So we're obviously, and you're going to hear a full update from Brian's team on the canal restoration efforts, but we are positioning ourselves, if necessary, we can move up to 10,000 acre feet this year. We're not planning to do that. Hopefully 5, maybe 8 if necessary, but we are ready to, and we will be, the canal is stored in plenty of time to move 10,000 if necessary. And the balance of the pre-14 rights, the 5,000 will be used at Reservoir 1 to meet our peak demands on the north side of Pollock Pines later this summer. Obviously, the long-term supply, the forecast, is showing that obviously Hazel Creek Tunnel is the key to success for our water supply next year. One significant benefit of these fall storms and of a side effect of the early outage earlier this year is we combined in the 4 Project 184 reservoirs at 8,000 acre feet more than we typically have this time of year. That's due to carryover in Caples Lake and Lake Aloha, as well as some temporary variances that our engineering staff have worked diligently with the Division of Safety of Dams to temporarily store reservoirs higher under continuing drought conditions, as long as it's safe to do so. And then once the canal comes back online, we'll be able to move that. So we've got the fuel, we're ready to go, and we just got to get the canal piece back together. Even if it turns out that those variances aren't ultimately able to continue because of benefited snowpack conditions, we still have about 4,000 acre feet above where we typically have this time of year. So either way, we've got plenty of fuel in the tank.
Given the tenuous situation of Silver Lake Dam, did this variance include Silver Lake?
Well, just want to state for clear that the dam remains safe to operate. Yes, we are working on a safety upgrade to the facility ultimately, but yes, all of the current condition of the facility is definitely Division of Safety of Dams errs on this side of caution. No one forgets Lake
Okay.
Oroville. So there's yes, it is safe to operate at its current level. So, next slide. Okay. And these are our numbers from last week. They haven't really gone up too much, which is good because that means a lot of this precip has actually come down as snow. We like to fill our pool, the analogy I use is we like to fill a pool with a garden hose and not a fire hose. And that's what we're doing today with the nice low snow and more gentle rain, but consistent rain, producing that runoff. Next slide, please. And as you recall, obviously later this summer, we were concerned about Folsom Lake. You could see that while the runoff definitely presented challenges for us, it definitely gave a shot in the arm to Folsom Reservoir. And for those folks online, just to quickly run through this chart provided by Department of Water Resources, The light blue polygon is our sort of 50-year historical average. Our dark blue is our current trend for this year, at least as of last week. Of course, that continues to climb. So you see, we've almost climbed back to our historical average this time of year. Now, in the agenda item, you saw we were talking about no snow because there was no snow last week. Obviously, now with having a little bit of snow, we feel even better. We'll hopefully continue to follow that light blue polygon and try to make that climb. We all remember last year, which is that kind of light green, if you will, lime green perhaps. That's not the trend we want to be on, and we're definitely not headed in that direction.
Dan,
Yes.
a question. As the previous megastorm helped us with water supply, and as these storms that are coming through now, the turbidity was an issue and a challenge for our treatment plants. Is there a natural, I assume there is, but just need verification, is there a natural settling of that particle matter in the storage so that we, even with the new inflows, will we have similar challenges in water treatment?
Great question. We're going to dive into a little bit more later and actually in more detail at the second board meeting set in January, but the answer is yes. And the higher the reservoir, the longer residence time of a reservoir, hydraulic residence time, is the better. So that's why we want to get that reservoir up. You have a larger pool to let it settle out in. So thank you for that question. Okay, next slide, please. Outingdale, we are back on normal operations, I should say improved operations with our rehabilitated dam and new pump station. Still working out a few of the punch list items there, but that's going well. And obviously aren't anticipating hopefully any water hauling anytime in the near future at this point. Next slide. And our next slide is just a quick summary of the cost. The board had requested this at the last meeting. So we hauled for just about exactly 3 months. We actually would have been able to end a little bit sooner, but we kept this going because staff focusing on the water quality challenges at Res A. The water was actually physically available a little earlier, but just on allocation of staffing resources. Our costs, fortunately, were less than anticipated, so about $112,000 for our local contract potable water hauling. And obviously, our staff time have to coordinate to ensure that water is safely transported because it's treated water, it's different restrictions for sampling.
That's good news because that's significantly less than we'd projected when we were facing the challenge of the drought.
Right.
So hats off to the people in Outingdale that cut back their usage, and good news.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we'll just kind of look at the going ahead into the winter. Next slide. Obviously, the first week that the forecast sent last week is hold true, as you can see outside today. We're expecting a little over, I think about in town here, a little over 3 1/4 today, another 1/4 inch tomorrow, 3/4 Wednesday, 1/4 a day. So, you know, half to 1 inch a day is what we like to see, a little more, but we're heading in for a good week and really happy to see that.
Right.
Next slide. It looks like next week a slight, increased chance of precip. Right now we're showing a drying pattern this weekend, but not a very high pressure coming in. That's what we don't want, in those really high pressures. Okay, next slide. And then overall is actually for December, kind of Christmas week, it's also looking wetter again, which is good. White Christmas. Although, next slide. Overall for the 3-month, which is really, this is what we look at for water supply planning. So this is a 3-month horizon, December, January, and February. Overall, slightly drier, so maybe after the holidays could potentially dry out. This gets updated every month, as you can see. We'll get another update here in a week or so. Hopefully that'll show a little bit white or perhaps a light shade of green by the time that comes. Next slide. Overall, no real change in California water supply. So brown means continued drought conditions. So it's not worsening, which is good, but it's showing kind of continued conditions. You can see, though, the Northwest is actually moving out of a drought, which is it's a good sign. We get that low pressure continue to slide south. That's what we want to see. Next slide. Okay, and this is our latest model from the Climate Prediction Center from National Weather Service. So this is that long-term model. Again, no squirrels, acorns, et cetera. But it does show that later in the spring, so these are 3-month, moving 3-month intervals. You look at there's a lot of lines here, which are all the models, but we're looking at the The green and the red lines are the statistical and dynamic averages. In this eastern Pacific weather ocean temperatures, and it shows temperatures returning to more normal conditions by the end of spring. So perhaps a more typical spring, but later in the spring we don't get too much precip anyways, but we'll see what happens. But this is really why we continue to be diligent about probably similar overall conditions for winter, at least the first part of spring 2022. Next slide, please. We continue our outreach efforts. There'll probably be another message pushed out today, just reminding people about their sprinklers, obviously. Mother Nature's doing that for us. You probably all read the most recent waterfront. We talked about lawn irrigation, some social media, and then also participating with our regional partners and some drought outreach messaging. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to pivot a little bit, and we're going to share some additional information, not to be alarmed, but to be informed. And we're going to dive into more technical details next month as we wrap up all of our analyses. We want to just draw an early picture for you about how we're responding to these fall challenges. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're all very much aware of our fall storm. During our last update was actually when that first storm came through, definitely decreased, I think ended the wildfire threat for 2021, and definitely gave a nice increase in the base flow in the rivers. But it did generate significant debris flows, and including over the Caldor fire scar. We did see significant turbidities, even down at Folsom Reservoir, which you'll see, as well as most notably, obviously, Jenkinson Lake. We did, as I mentioned, we did have the Howdingdale pump station remain off just because of allocation resources, so that was actually not affected by the fall storm. Next slide. So this was the chart that we all looked at that week, 10 to 15 inches of rain in the foothills. It was pretty spot on. We got just under 12 inches for that first storm. All rain, all the way up to the top of the watershed. So that's a lot of rain on a very dry watershed. And then about, only a little over an inch, but we had just been through that very significant storm 2 weeks earlier, that first storm in November. What's important here to remember is due to our water right limits, we actually can't fully divert into Jenkinson Lake from Camp Creek Tunnel to November 1st. So that first significant wave down the Camp Creek watershed, which was significantly impacted by the fire, actually went over and past the dam, and you'll see some of those photos. We can only open 12.5 CFS, which is 2%. So, staff very easily adjusting that, and then on November 1st, gate was wide open, and that's when we took the majority of the first potent storm of the season. Next slide.
What would it entail? I know it was a big deal to change the operations at Folsom Lake, but what would it entail to move that date up earlier, given that, we're going to, more unpredictable weather, so.
That would be a application to actually modify our water rights. And that storm, for a lot, as we all know, is very atypical. You'd never see anything like that. I shouldn't say never. You pretty much never see anything like that that early in the season.
Right.
We've never had that challenge before. It was sort of a blessing and a curse, right? Because if we did have it open, we would have taken some very turbid water. And we want to make sure we always, and we do, always meet our water quality standards. So, that's not something at this point, I think, from a hydrologic standpoint would really
Be worth.
Yeah, at least in my 2 decades being here, probably.
There was over
makes sense.
600 CFS coming through. We could have really used that to fill the pond.
That's true. My operators would also say, I'm glad you didn't give me the
Well, I
water. So-
understand, but I looking at water quantity, not quality would be.
Right, for sure. So this is just a kind of a quick walk through the watershed. This is our, off to the left is our Folsom Lake. That's the gigantic barge. You can see that's a full-size excavator. That's there at Folsom Reservoir. If you can draw your attention on the near shore, they're very brown, if you can see that. So there's a huge silt curtain that we have around our facilities. And what staff was seeing come down is a huge wave of muddy water.
Right.
And we're temporarily taking off those floating barges outside the curtain. And that's where we actually had to shut down El Dorado Hills Water Treatment Plant because our coagulant, the chemical that binds to the dirt, pulls it out, was going above the maximum allowed dosage. So we turned it off. Our contractor moved that curtain out of the way. It's fortunate we were actually just finishing that phase, so we're able to turn that situation around in 24 hours. Actually, a little less than 24 hours. Next slide, please. This is the slide I left you with at the October 25th update. So, and I said, hopefully this is the last time it's not flowing for the year. That was definitely true. Next slide. And this was November 9th. And so I look at, if you look in the foreground here in the color of that water, that's actually ash. And I happened to be able to, every once in a while, let me out of my cage. And so I went around and with my staff to get out there. I'm sorry? I'm sorry. Yeah. So this is organic ash, so carbon basically. So heavy particles, and so that's the water as it's coming over the waterfall.
Oh, yeah. That's how, seriously, that's how my pool looked that first rain.
Yeah.
Washed everything off.
Everything
the
in.
trees into the pool, and it looked like that.
And then I'm going to hand you the next one, and this goes directly to the question that Director Dwyer asked. And this is that same, I split the sample, and I still can do this stuff. And so I encourage you, I haven't shaken this one up, you can see how quickly it settles out. So that's the same sample after just a few minutes. I brought that, I shook it up on the way down here. Shows you how quickly that organics just settle, so the particulate settles out of the water. And then fortunately, after the treatment plant, looks like this.
Let's see you do that
That
at Deer
brings
Creek.
up an issue, Dan, that I've had a lot of people say that the water tastes different.
Great question.
And
Yes.
I assure them that the water meets all the state standards and everything else, but because of the ash content and other debris, it's going to be a while before it gets back to our normal pristine tasting water. And just going to be, I mean, it's safe to drink, not a problem, but, you know.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Director Osborne. And we're going to have an initial primer on that exact subject today, and we're going to dive into that more next month. Yeah, definitely the natural organics, the organic carbon has increased loading, and it just changed the source water quality. When I go visit my in-laws, I smell their, you smell their water back east. So we're definitely blessed with very good water quality, and there's obviously a change that happened this fall.
So there's, just to bring this discussion to a head, but, I think most of us have been getting those concerns from our neighbors and residents about the taste. My one concern, and I've seen this happen, is water heaters are also filtering this. And water heaters, if they're not drained appropriately to get the silt out on the bottom, say a water heater maybe 2 or 3 years old, that it makes sense to drain it and put in fresh water. But, it takes 10 days for water to come down from Sly Park into Cameron Park. And so that water is in those pipes. And I've heard a lot of concern from my neighbors about smell and taste.
No, so let's just separate the two just for a second for purpose of discussion. So taste and odor is a personal taste,
Right.
personal observation. There's not a regulatory standard for taste
I
and
could
odor.
smell it in my own
Right,
use.
so-
Bad.
Yeah, and I can smell it, but then my wife can't. So it just
Yeah.
really depends.
Right.
But as far as the in the finished water itself, there's no turbidity. That we still
Right.
meet our turbidity standards for finished water. So there shouldn't be a difference in the finished water. This is all what we call our source water, wild water, prior to treatment.
Correct.
And you'll see how hard our facilities work to address that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next slide. So this is the Reservoir water treatment plant. In the morning of the 26th into the 27th. Normally, at the bottom of the reservoir, nice deep 1, 2 NTUs. I think it was 3 this morning. Next slide. It was 130 that morning. So it just shows you what our staff were. And we initially, as we were responding to dealing with the fire, but next slide. We actually realized there was actually a combination of factors, even setting aside the fire, and I'm going to talk to that. So as I mentioned, we were able to idle the El Dorado Hills water treatment plant and work off storage until Folsom Lake really freshened up. And that are really where most of the work was done at the Reservoir A water treatment plant. Our staff actually temporarily adjusted to 24-hour continuous shifts to help do that. And I mentioned the Camp Creek Tunnel obviously was majority closed, so this is just a local watershed inflow. Next slide. There it goes. So this was that first storm. As you could see, portions of the Caldor Fire donations there, and all of that, the tunnel is almost virtually closed, 98% closed. So most of that water is going right over the dam there, and most of the debris as well. Next slide. This was Park Creek, so this is the localized inflow that we're getting on that morning of the 26th. As you can see, obviously the flows had receded quite a bit by daylight. That's actually the downstream part of the Camp Creek Tunnel in the background. So as you can see, it's really not flowing. So this is all Park Creek proper. This is right at the confluence there. Next slide. This was the second storm, and this is where I was able to go out, and I want to draw your attention. So this was the same day that those samples were taken, just about an hour later. If you look at the ash on the shores there, so you see where very large deposition during the first storm, and then the second storm came and is just kind of moving this down the watershed, and then you can see the shot just below the dam there. That's a lot of the debris, et cetera, that our staff had to physically manually with come-alongs until our excavator gets here, move that debris over. So, next slide. So as we really took a look around the watershed, what we realized is if you even set aside the fire, just that amount of rainfall in a very dry watershed, just around the reservoir itself, that's the island on the left. You see those very large erosion channels just on a low reservoir, so very high precipitation rate, low reservoir. That's over at the main day use area there. It's really hard to gain a true perspective of the size of these, but there is a vehicle up on that day use area there. So those are about 6 feet deep incisions. So hopefully the water comes up, the wave action will level those out. If not, we'll probably go in there and just for safety reasons, just level them out ourselves. But we do anticipate the reservoir to come up and wave action to level those out. Next slide. There's just a few other local areas. So you see the buoy line there. So that's around the dam over by Bumpy Meadows day use area. And so really a lot of the turbidity was actually just from the local watershed immediately surrounding the reservoir. And that's just a natural process. Next slide. Our staff, fortunately, we have not got any large woody debris flows in through Park Creek, even though that watershed was heavily burned. Our staff has repurposed some older boom logs from Caples Lake, and it's hard to gain appreciation of the size of those, but that's about 350 feet long. Each one of those are 10 feet to catch some large debris if it does come in. Next slide. And just to that, you recall that we gave a quick update from the Burned Area Emergency Response Report from CAL FIRE and Forest Service earlier this fall following the Caldor fire. And the bar chart, the second one there is one of their modeling points, and that's Camp Creek at our diversion dam, showing a tripling of flows as a result of the fire during the storm. So so as I mentioned, November 1st was the first time we can open up that tunnel fully. So in an hour and 6 minutes, we went from 5 cubic feet per second to 402 cubic feet per second. And that was with a 1.2-inch rainstorm. So it really shows the effect of how quickly and how flashy. That's why we're very excited to see a lower rate this morning coming down as snow. Remember, there's only a certain amount of capacity. Anything over 500, we can't physically push through there. Next slide. And then, as I mentioned, the USGS is doing ongoing modeling research of our facility. This is on the upper left. That's a drone photo, a 3D drone photo of the confluence of Park Creek and Camp Creek Tunnel and Hazel Creek Tunnel. That was the upper left is before the first storm. The bottom left is on that day of the first storm. And then the upper right is the second storm. You see cutting its way through the historically accumulated sediments. And then I had our staff go take that last week and see we've got down to the original creek channel there. So hopefully a lot of that initial push that we saw in those first two storms has settled itself back out. And hopefully going forward, we won't experience those same challenges. Next slide. Okay, so just real quick in the interest of time here, I know I always say that, but I know we have a lot of information here. We've been in very close contact with Division of Drinking Water to make sure we meet our appropriate regulatory standards. I'm happy to say we were able to meet all acute water quality standards. We're starting to see elevated disinfection byproduct level, and we've seen this about 6 times before this has popped up. So it's not the first time we've experienced this challenge. It's just the first time post the storm. And I'll show you what that means in a second. That's calculated on a rolling 12-month average, and that's measured at 8 locations. Next slide. That's a process of the disinfection byproducts are formed by chlorine interacting with organics in the water. So obviously, you have runoff conditions, you have more organics in the water. It's a more recent monitoring requirement. It didn't historically have, came into effect maybe 5 years ago. We always take primacy, we always take priority over acute water quality. So maintain disinfection so we don't have any pathogens in the water. That's our number one charge. And we do expect to encounter this for a couple years. Next slide. So as I mentioned, that high-intensity rain definitely produced a lot of suspended solids and a lot of naturally occurring natural organic matter, or NOM. You heard me say NOM a couple times here. And what's important is that when that natural matter comes in, it can mask the effects of the disinfection. So it's really important for us to try to get that out of the water so that the chlorine will properly disinfect the water. And that's our number one priority. Next slide. So it doesn't have any direct health effects. It does have that taste, odor, personal observation, but there's not a direct health effect of that. So if you kind of think of natural organic matter as a combination of what you can see, the particulate in there, and then what you can't see in those jars, and that's the dissolved carbon. So that's in the water. And what we're really following is a dissolved carbon. So, and about overall, typically about 90%, the majority of it is actually dissolved. There's a lot more carbon than you can actually see in that water. Next slide. And I did a little bubble chart to try to kind of, and it feels like chemistry, I know, but we'll just quickly go through it. So we did, in our yellow on the far left, for those online, we have elevated cloudiness, turbidity of the water. So that's a combination of inorganics, sand, things like that, and organics, natural organic matter. And then from, in natural organic matter, you have particulate, and you have, excuse me, get it in my head. So you have in total organics, you have the particulate, which is about 10%, and then about 90% being dissolved. And it's that dissolved part that interacts with the chlorine molecules to form the disinfection byproduct. So we're chasing the DOC, but we use turbidity as a surrogate for that. Okay, next slide. So just a last slide here, quick summary. We obviously have much more favorable updates as to 2022 than I had for you at the end of October. But at least at that point, the nice warm November was starting to feel not very comfortable, a little too much high pressure, nice weather days. But I think hopefully we're starting to change that, but we're still on track to have aggressive filling of the reservoir once the canal's back online. And we'll move as much as we need to. We do anticipate continuing to counter this water quality challenge for, as we're being advised, maybe 3 to 5 years, something like that. And we're gonna have a more full in-depth technical detail presentation for you, most likely obviously led by Rudenko, not myself, at the second board meeting in January. So thank you for indulging me this morning.
Okay, questions?
Yes, Dan, for the diversion and the debris that was in front of the diversion, we purchased or authorized the purchase of a excavator with a thumb so we could pick the logs out of the way. Did we get delivery of that machine?
It's scheduled December 22nd, and we just checked last week, so it's still on track. It'll go through about a week of processing, so we'll probably pick it up around the first of the year.
We had a rental, is that?
We did for the initial work, and then it obviously didn't rain. Now that staff were down there yesterday and today, I'm not sure if they picked up another rental, but we're poised to do that if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if the, yes, Director
Dan,
Osborne.
has there been any discussion with Forest Service and my old outfit, CAL FIRE, about re-veg projects to mitigate the erosion that'll continue over the next couple of years?
I've had a couple initial email discussions. I'll say, having participated in a discussion panel with Forest Supervisor Marcellet, it's, I know, a very high priority of his. And then obviously he's well aware on the Camp Creek side, on the southern end of the forest, that's the water supply for the county. So their initial scoping, but they were actually started some of that work even before the fire was completely contained. So that is in the initial stages, I will call.
Okay, thanks.
So unless there's any other questions, I'm going to ask the board for a 5-minute break before the next workshop.
Before we,
Oh, before that, public comment. Thank you.
We're waiting for any public comment or looking for any public comment on information item number 10. President Antozzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to make a comment on information item number 10.
Okay. 7-minute break, and then we'll come back for the next workshop. Okay. We're going to be on the workshop regarding the Caldor fire recovery. The camera's on you.
All right, well, Merry Christmas to everybody on the board. Get to say that at least once just before we have a little break here. I'm Kerry Muchler, I'm the Senior Civil Engineer. I'll be going over some of the projects that we have going on up the hill regarding the restoration of our canal system. Next slide. So some previous board actions. We know about the ratification of the Declaration of Emergency. We've had a couple of instances where we've ratified the contracts for not only our contractor, but for the designers to get the designs ready for construction, as well as some tree falling contracts. I will speak specifically just to the flume sections, and then Brian Deason will get up and comment on the tree falls. Next section, next slide. So just an overview of what we're dealing with right here. Remember, flumes 4, 5, and 6, and 30 burned during the Caldor fire. Those were those little areas right there, and then at the end of our what we call the Mildable Tunnel. So it's right below our diversion structure and around the Whitehall area, if you're familiar with that. Next slide. So the status right now where we're standing on flumes 4, 5, and 6 is we have the design complete. We are working on getting the drawings complete this week to get to the contractor. All the hazardous materials as a result of the fire, if you remember, the pressure-treated wood made a hazardous material that we had to remove. Those have been removed and are in the process of being shipped to Nevada for disposal. We've rehabbed 6 miles of road and constructed about a half mile of new roads. The excavation portion for flumes 5 and 6 are completed, and the elevated wood section for 4, the part that we had to leave for timing, has been repaired and restored. So while we were there, the operations crew went in and actually did a reline on the older section. We were anticipating a mid-January water update. We have kind of been set back. We are kind of evaluating how these storms are coming right now. When I looked this morning on some of the sites, on the pictures that we have on the site, we got kind of lucky in that we only have a light dusting of snow currently on the sites, which for us is that's a good thing. Feet of snow right now is harder to get through than inches of rain. So we will see how we fare over the next few days. Yes, that's my concern as well, is that we're going to get a little colder and some more precipitation. So what I'd like to do right now is just take a little break from the slides. We have a video that we've shot, some drone footage. This video is available on the website as well as our YouTube channel. So for those who would like to see that, we have that ready. This first video was filmed right after the October storms that Dan just went over. So this is actually done on November 5th before that 1-inch storm. So if we can go ahead and shoot these. The upper right there are the access roads. The lower left, you see that? That's our flume section. What you're seeing here was, or right there, was our borrow area that we're getting all our dirt and rock from. This is just
How
enough.
steep it is.
That's, this right here is going, right here is just upstream of Flume 5, moving into Flume 4. That is the road where you see the buggies. That's the road coming down. That's about a 33% grade. You'll see that in a second more clearly. But this is the, we've been able to get the cleared up, the site kind of cleared up, all the debris off. You can see, this is like, again, we had not, you can see on the left, you'll see where the burned out section, that one box that got repaired. And then underneath this, of course, we had to crib up. We had 2 columns on the, they were about 15 foot tall that we had to restore right there. This is also occurring right when the tree falling is almost completing for the hazard tree removal on this site. This is again the access road going up to the borrow area off of Flume 4. This is the steepest road that we have to go with right now. And that is where we're getting all our rock and dirt from. It's about 8,000 yards of rock, and it's a lot of rock that we put in, and we'll show some pictures later on of what we did with that rock in order to speed up some of our construction. This is the access road going over to the Flume 5 and 6 roads. That going up to the left was existing road. This is the new road that we constructed down to the bench. It's got this nice little turn in it, and then goes down. You'll see where we filled in the canal, and we're able to get across and can widen our bench in this area so that we can get the equipment across. This is the new bench. You can see where we've got the erosion control on the downhill side to prevent anything from eroding away. This winds around to Flume 6, where it had been excavated. This is again right after the storm, so it's all covered in plastic so we don't have to deal with the mud. And currently, if you were to go up to the site right now, you'd see a lot of this right now. There's a lot of plastic down to prevent us having to recondition the soil that's in the area. This is Flume 5. You see the green pipe, that's the bypass for the creek so that we can keep everything working in the dry. Again, this is looking downstream now. Some of the trees that we did, that's our burned out alarm site that we have to repair. We're gonna actually move that closer to the canal since now we have a big wide open area where we used to have trees. It doesn't make sense to have it 75, 100 feet away. So we can move that into a little closer, easier to maintain. So that's pretty much, we can go ahead and stop that. Jennifer, that kind of gives a brief idea of what we had as of November 5th. Now going back to our PowerPoint here.
Kerry, how much of with the tree cutting down, how much of those were hauled away versus just like tossed downhill for erosion control?
That's a good question. Most of the trees were felled and left in place. We had a few that were on those access roads that when we were constructing, we did take those and deck them, and the Forest Service gave us, it's a phenomenally cheap rate. I think we paid $40 to chop down hundreds of trees that we could deck. And that's at both the 30 site and the 4, 5, and 6 site.
Yeah.
And that's just due to them being burned, and there's no marketable value.
No,
With it.
you could tell the intensity of the fire there
Yes.
was high because there was no signs of life.
Yeah. We had matchsticks there.
Yeah.
That's a burnt matchsticks is what it really looked like.
Yeah.
So next slide. So again, this is just a brief overview you saw in the video of our borrow area. This is again where we're getting the rock. This was again in cooperation with the Forest Service to be able to use this site so close, and it is providing everything that we need to be able to get the foundations in for the flumes. Next slide. So Flume 4, you see up above, the upper left, that's what it was in the burned out condition. There is the completed Flume 4 section on the lower left, That's a new foundation pier where you see that ends. That's where the concrete will begin. So that's a shared interface that we will do to go from wood to concrete. This on the lower part is some of the problems that we're having with 4 right now. This is a large rock. This one isn't so bad. This one's buried into the mountain. We're going to keep this one here and not remove it. And we're going to pour a leveling pad over this and incorporate it. All this rock in here is really hard, 8,000 PSI. That's compared to the concrete that we pour is 4,500 PSI. So it's stronger than what we have. And we dial in and anchor the concrete to these. Next slide. This is some of the more problematic area. The one on the left is about where this excavator is sitting on the upper corner of the other picture. These, we are in a combination of we have to remove some of these and some we will incorporate. It's this middle section where the guy in the orange shirt is standing. That is what is our biggest problem area. That is a lot of loose rock and shale. And we're having to excavate around 30 feet deep to get down to competent material. Then we'll pour some concrete leveling pad and come up with the MSE wall. But it takes, that's what's going is right now is one of our critical path areas is this one, and then I'll show you in a minute on Flume 30. Next slide. Flume 5, again, upper left, you see the burned out, what it looks like. This is what I was talking about on the lower left, all the rock that we had. You can see this is the same vantage point. You see where we've had to fill in to build this part where we can actually get to the point where we're doing what we're doing on the right is bringing in the soil to be able to build our channel to which we will build the U-shaped canal. This is on the right is some night work that they're doing just to keep progress moving. They bring in truckloads of dirt. They come in, they've got a compactor. That's the little divots you see in the soil. That's a compactor that rolls over it a number of times so that we can make it as hard as possible. We will build that up to almost a full height, and then we come in with the excavator and excavate out that U-shaped canal, then form it and pour it. Next slide. Flume 6, this one is ready to go. This is the full build-out section. This is ready to excavate and then shoot or to get the shotcrete in, put the rebar and then the shotcrete. Again, this was just showing some night work of them getting in and building this up in the layers on the right. So we need about a week of clear weather to finish 6 right now. That's all it'll take to excavate it out, get the rebar in, and then put the shotcrete in.
How temperature sensitive is it? It's really cold.
We will tent it. We build these nice big elaborate tents. We've got what I called when I was doing drywall construction. We use these things called salamander heaters. They're propane heaters.
Right.
It heats everything up, but we've got to have around 50 degrees inside to be able to get the concrete to set properly.
Right.
All right, next slide. This is what again what we'll be looking at when we're finished. This is the canal portion. We will have some U-shaped flume sections, meaning that you're not going to have dirt on the either side. It'll just be freestanding concrete. That's the stuff going over the canals and sections. But majority of this will look like this, where we have the U-shaped canal and a bench. The one on the left is from our current 3840 that we're just finishing up. We'll probably finished up Friday on that one. All done, set with that one. And then the right was Flume 44 that we just recently constructed. Next slide.
Do you think that the experience that Cybone Reed gained by doing those sections is really going to help us accelerate 4, 5, and 6?
It was a different contractor for 3840 and for 44. That was KW Emerson.
Oh, okay.
But Sybil and Reed has that same experience. No, they know how to work this. Both those companies have done a lot of work for us and know what we're looking for and how to get things done. So, yeah, they've got the experience to get this stuff. So, Flume 30, as you're aware, we went out to contract with this with the hope of doing this over a 2-year construction. We've had to do some redesign in order to make this a one-year construction project. We've got most of that complete. We had a minor little setback on Friday with some of the stuff where we've encountered the similar problems that we were having at 4. And so we're getting through some of that. But the hazardous materials, again, have been removed. We've got the 3-mile Forest Service access road is all rocked and weathered. And the half-mile of new road with the MSE walls and the rock is almost done. The MSE walls are done, we're just now getting the rock in. And that's what we need to get into the site. We've got our road over the Mildable Tunnel. We were able to save some time on that by not having to put concrete down. We found out we were further up on that. We had more coverage, and the rock was harder than the concrete we were going to place, so we just left the rock. The bypassing for Bull Creek is in, and the bridge abutments are also in. And again, we're evaluating our water update depending on how our weather goes. And I do have a video of this one, and this one's only about a week old. So if we can bring that up. So that's the building you see down there on the left. That is the tunnel portal. Comes out, goes across. This is now up or downstream of Flume 30. This is the section that, of course, burned. We've got most of the cleanup, as you can see, done. We've got a little bit of debris down there at the side. That's on the left there. You saw some concrete piles. That was the 60-foot section that we did to make sure our elevations work. You'll see a nice new bridge abutment where that excavator and that yellow is. That's a new abutment for the new bridge that is going to go and span what we call Bull Creek right there. You can see the bypass pipe, that big black pipe that's set into Bull Creek. We've got the road going over that bypass pipe to get our access. This is where we take our water rights from, the flume section. A lot of that was destroyed in the fire, so we'll be rebuilding that. There is again, the bridge abutments. You can see the wood on the left on that abutment. That's now already been ready and poured with concrete. So we're ready just to bring in the bridge, which we have sitting in the SPI yard, and just set that down now. So that's a big improvement. This is a generator that we're lowering to operate the pump. While we're doing this, we also have ongoing tunnel inspections that we're trying to get into all 6 of our tunnels. So this is to get that dewatered so that we can get in and look at that tunnel, make sure everything's running okay. This is, again, the old bench that we reutilized where the flume section used to be. And then you'll see coming up on the right is our new access road. The bench continues down on the left where that excavator's sitting, and then the access road is there on the right. When we come up on a second, you'll see another road coming down. That was the fire break that CAL FIRE broke through and to contain the fire. We've been utilizing that at times as well. But now with this road being done, we are able to just get all of our equipment in. That's the MSE wall you can see, what we call Wall B. And that is just finished with topping out with the rock, filling in the backside. It's got drains in there so that it can make sure it doesn't wash out and can handle any water that comes our way. That's just got to get the final lifts, which again was being done during the dry part of last week. That's the fire break on the right. And then as we turn up, we'll go up to Wall A. It's a little bit longer. And then we'll turn around and you'll see our laydown area where we're storing the soil and other supplies that we need to ferry in. And that's the end of at the end of the 3-mile Forest Service access road that we re-rocked. So we've got our turnarounds, and those are designed so that we can get a 10-wheeler down. They can do it without having to back up. Not having those back up really helps with our production rates. So again, there's the laydown area, and we can go ahead and stop that from there. Nice view looking over the area there. Next slide. So again, just some pictures just showing the height of those walls. You know, they range anywhere from 15 to 25 feet tall. Next slide. Again, just real quick on the bypass, you can see the bridge abutment that was poured on the left picture, on the left side. That has now been formed, and now that's got a concrete all over the top, so it's ready for the bridge. Next slide. This is the tiebacks, the anchor tiebacks that went in. You can see the machine that we used to those. Those get driven in about 10 to 15 feet, and then tension to keep that wall in place. They're grouted into to rock and soil, and then tension to hold everything. And then that's the excavation of the canal to get all the debris cleaned up. Next slide. So upcoming work, we've got the excavations to finish at 4:30. That's the last of what we call our mystery work. Once we have that excavation done, it goes pretty quick after that. We need probably about a month to a month and a half of clear weather to finish this work. Kind of goes with the scales. Flume, like I said, flume 6, we get a week, we can get that one done. Flume 5 is about 2 to 2.5 weeks. Flume 4 and 30, those are the longer run that we need. We need to still keep moving about 5,000 cubic yards of soil, and then shotcrete the new canal sections. And just so I can let you all know, there are some tours that are being available if you do wish to go up. We're looking at Friday the 17th and Monday the 20th. Work with Jim will let me know, and Brian on who wants to go up, but we can get some.
You can work with the board clerk and let me know if you're interested, and I can give you more of the details on the 17th or the 20th. You know, of course, we're not going to have more than 2 board members attend, you know, for safety and other logistics and such.
If there's
I think this is an excellent presentation and would be well-served to give to the community. And I would offer it to the Board of Supervisors. Brian could maybe take it to Kiwanis, Jim or I could take it to Rotary, maybe my ex-director Mike could take it to Lions. This is not a simple project, but it's flat land where you've got to go in and just rebuild it. I think this is a massive project, and it should be well distributed to the community, though, what we're up against to get a third of our water supply back into production. So a job well done, guys, that you're doing, but I think we could really use this out as community outreach.
We can go out there and make solicitations on this, but it always reminds me of people compare our rates to Folsom. Folsom has a straw out of the dam.
Yeah.
And we have things like this we have to deal
Exactly.
with. It's just a completely different infrastructure need for our community, but we can get something scheduled and get it out to the community.
Yeah, and thank you for the drone footage, because it really shows the scope and scale of it. It's mind-boggling.
So I just want to just kind of repeat what you said. I think it's really important in full transparency that the more, even though people compare us, don't get frustrated on that, because it is incumbent on us to educate them on how it takes a mountain to get water to their faucets in El Dorado Hills. So I suggest Chamber of Commerce is also.
Director Encini.
Yes.
Just a couple of comments, and one is the extent of work that we've done on the roads and the access. We need to make sure we can maintain those, so we can maintain what our improvements are. But also the side benefit of that is those roads are available for CAL FIRE and firefighting access, and we need to somehow emphasize that. And kind of as a corollary, the cooperation of the Forest Service, I think, has been huge and important. And we probably should write a letter from the board president, perhaps, to the forest supervisor, Jeff Marsalis, and say thank you for helping us,
I would add one other group with that, and that's Sierra Pacific Industries.
Sierra Pacific.
We
SPI.
crossed their lands as well, and if it wasn't for their granting us the access to do so, we still wouldn't have been to do that. And that, and with all the other stuff that they do for us, that's another
It's a
company
good
that's
partnerships.
So noted. Thank you very much.
All right, if there's no other question, I'll turn the time over to Brian for the tree falling.
Okay.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Brian Deason, Environmental Resources Supervisor for the district, and I'm here today to provide an update on our hazard tree falling efforts. Yeah, thank you. So as a result of the Caldor fire, there are a large number of hazard trees that have the potential to fall. That potential poses a risk to both staff and the public, as well as the potential of causing further damage to our critical water conveyance facilities, namely the El Dorado Canal. So in response to this risk, back in September, as soon as it was safe to enter the burned areas, we contracted with registered professional foresters to survey for hazard trees and mark ones that needed to be removed. Next slide, please. This turned out to be quite an extensive effort, as approximately 5 miles of the canal were affected by the fire, as well as numerous access roads that crews used to access the canal. So to take on this task, we divided the canal into segments. We issued requests for bids to conduct the hazard tree falling activities in each of those segments. To date, we've awarded 3 competitively bid contracts. And as Carrie mentioned, the contractors working on the flumes are removing the hazard trees in those project areas. We did, I do want to note that we competitively bid these contracts in compliance with FEMA requirements to increase our chances of these being reimbursable efforts. We've made substantial progress. To date, our efforts have been focused along removing trees along the canal so that when we're ready to flow water, all the hazard trees are removed. We've removed approximately 1,800 hazard trees to date. And as of this morning, I think we've got about 50 more to do before we're completed along the canal. As I'll describe, we have probably about that many trees that still need to be removed along access roads. Next slide, please. This is a map just to kind of give you an idea of where these activities are occurring. So for orientation purposes, the red line is Highway 50. We have Khyber's diversion dam on the right side of the map, Ice House Road roughly on the left side of the map. The pink shaded area is, of course, the extent of the Caldor fire in this area. And then the bold colored lines are segments of the canal, and this is how we broke the work out. So working from right to left, that first blue segment, there's approximately 700 trees that need to be removed in that area. We still have a handful of trees, maybe 25 trees left in that reach to be done, and those are scheduled to be done as soon as weather conditions allow. The next segment, flumes 4, 5, and 6, this is where the contractor took care of the hazard tree falling, and they've completed that work. The bright green segment is flumes 7 to 13. That work has been completed. I believe that was about 390 trees removed. And then Camp 1 to the El Dorado Tunnel, there's maybe 25 trees in that segment to be left to be removed as well. Then we have of course, the El Dorado Tunnel, the Mill to Bull Tunnel, where no work was done. The yellow segment is flume 30, where the contractor has completed that work. The next segment was Flume 30 to Camp 2, about 350 trees on some pretty treacherous terrain was removed in that segment, and that has been completed. The contractor who's working on Flumes 38 to 40 also took on the hazard tree falling efforts in that segment, and they've completed that as well. You can see those two or three bright green lines. Those represent approximate alignments of the access roads that we're going to start focusing on next. And as I described, we probably have several thousand trees along those access roads that need to be removed.
Brian, before you go to that next slide, if I'm not mistaken, the light green on the far left flume section is 46? The one that's the 3,800 feet?
Yes, so Flume 46 on the far left, you are correct.
That's the one we've briefed the board on that is a very high priority for us to start working on to minimize any type of future impacts on fire there. That would have been a very difficult one to restore, so that's a high priority, and you can see how close the fire got to it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So what's next? We plan to go out with the hydro crews, with our registered professional foresters, and we're going to resurvey all the areas where work has been done, just to be sure that we've removed all the hazard trees that we need to before we water up. We expect to have all this work done, absent this weather, we would have been done this week, but we'll certainly expect to be done with all hazard tree removal along the canal by the end of December. And then we're going to shift our focus to hazard tree abatement activities along the access roads. And I do want to, recognize this has truly been a team effort here. From getting these RFBs out on the street, Ryan Deaking in purchasing, and Miss Elizabeth Leeper, our Deputy General Counsel, helped to ensure that we followed all the FEMA requirements. Doug Venable has done an environmental review analyst, has done a great job as overall project manager. And hydro crews, Matt Heap, Matt Warden, and Jason Paparo have provided great support and technical input in the tree falling activities along the canal. So that is end of my report.
Anybody have any questions? Any board members? Opportunity for the public comment?
We have a little bit more, I think.
Oh yeah, I didn't do the proper handoff.
With work
Now I'd
by
like to
staff.
turn it over to Dan Gibson, our
Okay.
hydroelectric manager, who's going to describe some work that district staff has done.
I will refrain from public comment.
Are there any signs of growth?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good. That's
Yeah.
a good sign.
It's amazing how quickly we started to see regrowth.
Yeah, Dan and I were out, what, a week or maybe 2 weeks after the fire, and you could already see the oak trees starting to bud back out of the roots.
Ah, good.
So hopefully it revegetates and
Yeah.
stabilizes the hillside.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on with the rest of the report.
Good morning. My name's Dan Gibson. I'm the district's hydroelectric manager. Hydro staff has been extremely busy ever since the Caldor fire hit us back in August. I'd like to go through some of the projects that we've performed in-house, and actually we're still working on them right now. So start with the flumes. You're aware that Flume 4 partially burnt. Overall, the flume's 400 feet long. Ended up burning 54 feet. We went through and replaced that section that burned. A bit of a challenge just because it is an elevated section, so it took a little bit longer just being safe. Flume 2A, a little bit easier, only 16 feet, plus it was level ground at that particular site. Next slide, please. District staff worked on the inlet of the Camp Creek Tunnel. What we did is we did make room for the excavator that's going to go through and remove the debris from the Camp Creek drainage. And the idea was we wanted to put the excavator right at the trash rack where the debris is going to build up, I should say. So we ended up having to move one of our gauging sites, relocate it to a different location. So ended up doing that, running all the conduit, reinstalling the solar antennas, water loggers, and all the other electronics that go along with it. We also have flume 10. It's a concrete flume, and we don't usually have problems with those, but in this particular case, we had a 40-inch tree that fell and hit the concrete section during the Caldor fire. Ended up breaking out one of the side panels. We had to go through and remove the remaining section. It's about 8 by 10 feet overall dimensions. From there, we formed it up and then ended up getting a cement truck and wheeling the concrete about a half a mile wheelbarrows to fill up the form. Get that project completed. Next slide. We work in remote areas frequently. It's really nice to have the roads that Carrie's team built as far as access to some of the sites. From the storm end of October, we ended up getting material debris that flowed into our canal in 2 different locations. The worst of the 2, we have approximately 200 yards of material, ash, dirt, debris that flowed into the canal, about 200 yards in length, about 2.5, 3 feet tall. So we went through and cleared out almost 90% of that so far. To prevent this from reoccurring, we ended up installing a bridge over the canal. You can see the retaining walls that focus the debris fall into this bridge section. And this is right at the outlet of a tributary that comes down a ravine right there on the mountainside. So our goal is, let's catch whatever debris comes down in the future. We know it's going to happen again, and just send it right on over the canal. We also rebuilt 2 gauging sites so far for the El Dorado Canal. Had to go through and install new water loggers, antennas, solar, all the miscellaneous gear that goes with them. We replaced numerous conduit runs and wiring in the burn area. Some of it was from the fire itself. Some of the problems were from trees falling, good-sized trees, limbs hitting the buried conduit. We've got Camp 1 house where the water filtering system was damaged. We ended up having to replace a 2,500-gallon tank along with all of the plumbing and the wiring that goes with it. Next slide, please. We installed log booms at Jenkinson Lake. You saw a photo of that in Dan's presentation. Again, that's just to catch the debris at 2 of the tributary creeks into Sly Park Reservoir. We rebuilt the Plum Creek siphon decking along with a lot of miscellaneous projects. And then as far as Echo and Alder conduits, they were both hit by the Caldor fire. Fortunately, the metal pipe is fine, it was in good shape. We just had to go through and replace the wood supports. You can see them on the right picture. That was, those areas were not burned. Replace those, it just stabilizes the pipe to where it'll stay in place as we run water through it. Next slide, please. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. We have a lot of work ahead of us still. We're getting to a point to where we pretty much run water, but I know we are waiting for contractors for some of that work to get moved along. But got a strong hydro team, and I'm confident we can get it done.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions from board members? This concludes your presentation?
It does.
Yes, it does.
Okay. I'd like to just acknowledge that our staff and everybody involved regarding the repairs of the canal and all of the work that's involved in reestablishing our strength and getting clean water to our residents is very important. And this whole board appreciates the fact that you are right there. So thank you very much.
Yeah, just as a side note, we meet about every 2 weeks, and it involves insurance, involves finance, involves engineering, operations, and everyone has a piece. I forget how many projects are on that list that Liz does, 50 or 60 different ones. It's very complex, not only in repairing it, but then which projects go to insurance, which projects go to FEMA, are we complying with all the regulations? It's really a team effort, so thank you for the acknowledgement.
It's a very big effort, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're going to request the public have any questions regarding this presentation.
President Anzini, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to make a comment on information item number 11.
Wonderful. So now we will move on to action items. The first action item is on finance.
Move 12.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. That would be Director Osborne and Director Day. Any
I
discussions?
will be recusing myself on this item.
Okay, Director Veerkamp will be recusing himself. All those in favor? Nope, wait a minute. Public comment on this item.
President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to make a comment on action item number 12, the ratification of the warrant registers and reimbursements.
All right. So therefore, board members, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries.
Okay. We'll move to item number 13, finance.
Still good morning.
Good morning.
So today I'm going to discuss the budget for 2022 and go over the financial plan for the 5 years, including 2022. And then added a little bit of information as to funding sources for the CIP that has been adopted back in November, as requested by Director Dwyer. So, presentation summary, it's right there. I'll go over just a few items and then get into the budget. Little history, back in March of 2000, that was when the board adopted using a multi-year operating budget process. This is the mid-year review. So therefore, the 2022 that was adopted last year in tandem with 2021 is being looked at, and revisions are proposed. November 8th and last month, board held a workshop on the operating budget and the financial plan, as well as it adopted the capital improvement plan at that time. So all intertwines.
Is there an error on that previous one, March 20, 2000?
That's when the board actually adopted the
For multi, okay,
Yes.
thank you. All right.
Probably could drop that since we're all aware of it now. But
Okay. It's kind of confusing. Oh, well, that's
Yeah,
fine,
so,
thank you.
I apologize for that. But,
No problem.
All right. So I'll just go over a few items, kind of high level today, since we dove into pretty much everything at the workshop. Obviously, if there's questions that come up, I'll address those. But I'll go through the revenue projections, mainly for the 2022, as well as the operating budget projections. Debt service coverage that we have to meet for our bond holders, and then go over briefly the 22 through 26 5-year financial forecast. So if you want to go 2 slides up. So the revenue projections for 2022, Revised slightly over from the prior year when we adopted both 21 and 22. Water sales actually projecting a little bit higher than originally adopted. So about $1.9 million for next year, assuming a similar water year to this. Wastewater sales will be less than originally forecasted, and that was primarily due to the rate analysis that we did back in 2020, and the repercussions of just essentially lowering the rates and not having any rate adjustments for next year for the wastewater side. Recycled water will have a slight uptick, and that's mainly due year over year to growth down in that El Dorado Hills actually area, and a 5% rate increase. Hydropower sales, as we know, we renegotiated or have a new contract for power sales. Not as good a power rates as we did with PG&E. It's just based on the marketplace. So adjusting next year's forecast to about $3.5 million. That probably will be adjusted downward a little. Well, actually, I was going to say be adjusted down for power production, but we will probably recover that through insurance because of the lost power production for this part of the probably January, and hopefully we'll be done powering or watering up by the end of January. But if not, there's hope that we'll get it through business interruption insurance. So it'll still be power, but it's not generated power. Investment income about the same, $750,000. FCCs were adjusted upward again based upon the discussions with our developers mostly down the hill, Cameron Park down into El Dorado Hills. Other significant difference in other income, that is related to $7 million in the USBR grant related to the Folsom Lake intake. Probably, well, we'll recognize that probably next year. And then about $100,000 related to FEMA grant related to our generator for meeting more or less the PSPSs, so generator purchases. Recreation have about I forecast the same as I did last year, and it'll be up from this year. Obviously, we had that interruption up at the park for a significant amount of time and lost revenue. 2 slides up. So for the 2022 budget, which we started early August, pretty much I directed staff or asked staff to keep it to 4% growth over the 2021 budget. That was our baseline, and that the personnel and materials and services items to maintain our current service levels. So that was the direction put out back then. So next slide, please. So this revision is actually, instead of 4% higher, it's 5.3% higher than what we adopted in 21. I'll go through the reasons why. The 22 proposed budget is a little over 2.2% higher than what we adopted last fall for the 21-22 multi-year budget. This budget also now includes a good portion of the 1.3% higher rating or percentage increase is related to the 3 new vegetation hires that we will have, as well as the equipment and all the operating supplies that will be included for those individuals. So this budget, some of the drivers, our personnel expenses are about almost $2 million higher than last year. Gross wages are $550,000 of that, which the components again are the 3 vegetation positions. Some step increases for those who still earn those, and then the COLA is about 0.7%, And the COLA, again, that I have built in here was 3%. So it doesn't reflect what's going on in the background for labor negotiations, but that's what was included. Capitalized labor, actually capitalized labor is what you charge off to projects as we build them. So it's actually reduction of operating expenses and then an increase to the physical asset that we're building. Year over year, based upon everybody's assigned people and work schedules, it actually decreased by about almost $900,000 as far as that offset. So that increases my operating expense of wages. Benefits are going to increase about $570,000 over 21. Most of that is CalPERS, the UAL adjustment that CalPERS has been doing. Next slide. Some of the drivers for the materials and services, it's about $1 million increase. A significant portion of that is the bottom line, $370,000. That is related to the tank recoating that is now scheduled in recycled water. That amount is about half of what the tank recoating is going to be. So about half is scheduled for probably going on pretty soon, and then going, or end of next year, and then the remainder fix will be in 23. And then there's also increases just based upon what staff knows are coming for operating supplies. Insurance went up $170,000 for the next fiscal year. I'm sure there will be an adjustment for the following year, as well as I'm sure other things. So next slide.
The decrease in utilities, is that because of our solar application at Deer Creek, or is that?
It's just, that's more of a, it was a 2-year look forward to kind of what PG&E was going to charge us. So that was just kind of going through all the meters that we have and adjusting. So I don't think it's truly related to that solar field yet. We still are trying to work out the details of the new
Pioneer.
agreements with Deer Creek and
With Pioneer Energy or PG&E?
no, it's, I can't remember the vendor. Yeah. Yeah. So Greenbacker, excuse me, that have built the new, we have a new arrangement with.
Okay.
And that's, we're kind of just getting our feet wet in finance with that arrangement. So there'll be some good positive impact there. And then I know PG&E has I believe, a significant increase coming our way also.
Right.
So, next slide. So that's a physical representation of the split of the pie as far as expenses. And then as we see, salaries and benefits, net of those charge-offs to the development projects is a significant piece of the operating budget. So again, like the last several years, we do have a contingency built in of $250,000 that sits in the general manager's budget. Pretty much for those unforeseen circumstances. I mean, the fire is abnormal, but for things that just come up in the normal day-to-day things that we can reallocate that contingency to other departments. So this is shows the 2022 benefits budget. Really no big surprises here. The PERS increase was slightly higher than I'd anticipated last year. So it's about $250,000 more. Medical insurance benefits, slightly less than I anticipated. I think that was related to, there was very good impact or lack thereof on the premium increases for 21 to 22 by CalPERS and their negotiated contracts. Next slide. And again, that's just a graphical presentation of the breakdown of expenses. CalPERS is almost half of the pie now.
I have a question regarding the CalPERS. My understanding, and I think it's coming down out of the Senate here in the state of California, on some funding mechanism to help relieve the CalPERS offset. And I was told this just a couple days ago, but I'm not familiar. But was it at Aqua? Was it at the Aqua conference?
I vaguely remember hearing some discussion about this, whether it's coming out of the legislature or the governor's budget development. I don't know, but that's certainly a topic that we can obtain some information
Okay.
from our state lobbyist, Bob Reed.
Correct.
I would suspect it's for the state's share for their employees. I doubt that it's going to be for us.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
But also next month, or probably in February, I'll be bringing back, I have a call out, or I've been discussing with our financial advisor and then have contacted Citigroup, which is the underwriter, looking at essentially doing a pension obligation bond for that UAL component, and therefore probably drop the interest rate from the 6.85 or whatever the new PERS rate is down to the probably a 2.5 or 3% market rate for that period of time that our UAL is ramping up and then ramping down, and then so probably a 15-year period or so. What I still want to know, and nobody's been able to answer, is how quick does CalPERS adjust the UAL? Once you pony up, that big deposit, how quick do they adjust it? So, there probably will be a period of time where we'll have a CalPERS payment of, at $500,000, whatever it is, and then we'll have a bond payment too. So we might double up for a year or so, but I'm trying to get an answer, and nobody has that for me yet.
Yeah, Mark, when you're looking at that, could you also try to find out what other agencies have done this, or are considering doing it? What are there's the practical aspects of it. There's just sometimes just number crunching, but also what kind of feedback or pushback even that other agencies are getting on it from a philosophical or ethical standpoint of doing this all at once. I mean, I know where you're going. I get the numbers might pencil out better, but let's look at it also from a holistic standpoint and what kind of feedback and other agencies are getting and who've done it, what others have done it.
Yeah,
Sure,
and how does it impact our financial ratings and all that as well?
Right. So I will reobtain. I did have some of that information 6 months ago when I started, and then I did this 20 years ago up in Portland area. So at that time, we just kind of merged with some other entities and did one big pension bond, and then everybody got their piece, but it's been a long time. This is just shows how our debt service coverage for the proposed for 2022. So for the bondholders, the ratio they're looking at is at 2.99 coverage. We have a requirement of 1.25. Excluding our FCC revenue that we're projecting of 13 million or so, it's still at 2.11 for 22. Now, when I get into the forecast, those numbers kind of start decreasing over time, just be based on assumptions and not, forecasts are always wrong once you adopt them. So going into the next slide. So some of the assumptions within the financial plan are we have rates in place for 22 through 25, not essentially implemented by the board yet, but that they were passed through the 218 process. So there's 5% rate increases for years 22 through 25. A 5% rate increase for 26 is built into the forecast, but has not been approved or adopted. So that's just the financial forecast. And the wastewater utility, again, there's a 0% rate increase for proposed for 22, 1%, 23 through 24, and then a 3% rate increase was through the 218 process, and then the next year is one that I show that has been not approved nor adopted. Again, implementation of the rates will help produce the funds for replacement of some of the infrastructure that might not be covered now through FEMA insurance, plus the CIP that was adopted last month. And then also a goal that the board has to have is maintaining the debt coverage as required by the debt covenants with our bondholders. Next slide. So for the financial plan, again, the 22 estimate for FCCs is 13.2 million. That's related to the discussions we have with our developers. And then in 23 through 26, it's included at $10 million each year. Hydropower sales are shown at $3.5 million. Again, it's in my original forecast, well, several years ago it was $6 million, but with the revised contract with Pioneer, it's $3.5 million. Surcharge revenue for the water line cover number 2 has ended. And so in 22 and the out years, that surcharge revenue will go down about $850,000 a year.
Mark, and maybe Jim, with the information about the flume and repair and the canal being offline, are we still anticipating being able to generate that much revenue?
On the hydroelectric side, if it's not generating the revenue, it would be loss of business insurance. So that's what we're estimating, and we're working through the insurance company now, and Dan's folks are calculating what water would be available to generate if the generators were up or if the flumes were there. So we're working that angle.
So, and then as far as the revenue projections for 22, again, $7 million for the intake down at Folsom Lake through the Bureau, about $100,000 for a generator purchases via FEMA, and then about $250,000 in 2023 for the generators in that out year. For the operating expenses, again, the 2022, it's a 5.3% increase of operating expenses. For 23 through 24, I show a 3% within the forecast, and then a 2% in the forecast for 25 through 26. I hope those are closer to accurate than what's happening right now, but who knows? It didn't seem at the time when I started building all this, but
Infrastructure bill going out is could jam a lot of construction projects going that put a demand on labor and material.
So for CPI, as far as the operating expense, that it could definitely drive for supplies. Again, as I said last time in the workshop, the forecast shows a $100 million bond issue in 2025, kind of related to what you were saying. Originally, I was showing $75 million. Based on costs and increases, we thought $100 million would be more prudent to put in there. And then the projected debt outstanding following that transaction from 2024 to 2025 would go up about $84 million. And that's, it didn't go up 100 because we're making bond payments as we go too. So that just shows we're keeping it within a manageable area as far as bonds outstanding. I was also taught, going back to the pension bonds, that the pension bonds would not affect our credit rating related to these CIP bonds. But I will verify that as we get closer to discussing it. And then the next slide just is a graphical of the prior slide, just shows the balance in 25 with the borrowing after the bond payments that we would show in 25. Now, this financial plan also shows, also takes into account non-revenue cash flow. So essentially, right now in 21, we're building a lot of stuff. We're going to be reimbursed for some of it this year, and then hopefully the rest next year. So in '21, I showed $5 million for insurance proceeds. It's actually $8.5 million. We just, we got a check 2 weeks ago that took up that total to $8.5 million. So this forecast is, so $3.5 million next year goes into this year, and then it goes down by $3.5 million in the forecast next year. And then, so the 2022 would probably be $21.5 million or so, based upon collections so far from the insurance. Insurance has, they know we've incurred that amount of cost. They have not allocated the specific projects yet. So that's kind of a up in the air thing between insurance and FEMA, because, you know, we're all kind of jumping the hoops for FEMA, but just because we like to collect the difference, whatever that may be. And then FEMA, Cal OES, since a lot of it seems like it'd be insurance, I threw $1 million in from FEMA for 2023. I'm suspecting that'll be low. But it might be in 24, 25, based on how we've dealt with the 2017 storm. So we just got some money a few weeks ago, and we actually wrote a check back on a project that was denied after a period of time. So it was $10,000. But so they're finally closing out the 2017 storm for us. The forecast, I just want to draw attention. The forecast hasn't changed. This is for the total district. Debt coverage is manageable through the 5-year period. It is going down over time. So 2026 shows about a 1.8 with the FCCs included, and a 1.36 when we back them out, our internal coverage test. But I wanted to essentially just close this out by the total CIP line that shows 42.3 million, yeah, right in 2022, and then it goes to the right to 39.5. If we go back a few slides, or not go back, go to the end to slide 32. This is how I project that CIP to be paid for at this moment in time. So through water FCCs, about $5.5 million. Wastewater FCCs, about $7.5 million. Water bond, about 10.3 in 2022. It goes away, and then in 2024, I show $17.5 million. Again, that bond issue probably won't happen until 25, but we have a look back on the bonds for a couple of years. We just have to adopt the resolution. So that's why I show those proceeds in the future actually paying for construction that would be ongoing or start up the year before or 2 years before. Water rates and wastewater rates will pay, you know, their balances, and then recycle. There's a few small projects within the recycle system. The big, unfortunately, the major rehabs, just like in water, of the tanks, those are operating expenses because we're not really extending the life of the asset. We're just keeping it in service and to just so it keeps working, I guess, you know. But so that's how I see the CIP being funded over the next 5-year period. And my CIP, my $42.2 million for 2022, is slightly lower than what was adopted by the board, just because no offense, it's not all going to get done. So just timing. So if it's a bond funded thing, it's already in progress. I say that those expenditures will be spent. Some of the others, I'd say it's a 70 or 80% calculation. The Hanson, the general district Hanson project, that's going to be spent because I see the guys in the room all the time. So I go through and just make my best guess as to how much we actually will spend on each of those projects. And I work it out a little bit with Brian Mueller and his group. But.
So, Mark, the portion of the CIP paid for by the rates, the water rates and the wastewater, that's really our pay-go projects?
Pretty much, yes.
Thanks.
There might be a couple, you know, the pay-go, You just want for the smaller project, the pipe replacements for, a mile or something like that. Now, when we do the mother load and all that, where you got miles and miles and this huge pipe, we should fund those with bonds, because those assets are in there for hopefully more than 30 years, but 50 years to much longer. So that just begs being a bond-funded type transaction.
So that's a pretty significant amount of money, though, from the rates.
Well, remember, we have the debt service coverage?
Yeah.
And it's like 2.2 or something. That additional revenue over the debt service coverage is what I call retained earnings in the private sector that you reinvest through the water rates to pay for the PAYGO projects.
Okay, thanks. I think that answers my question.
So, based on that, the board options are to adopt the 21-22 mid-cycle operating budget, and then essentially it's the revised 22, and then the 22 through 26 financial plan, including the implementation of the previously approved 5% rate increases for water and recycled water, and a 0% increase for the wastewater utility for 2022. Option 2, take other action as directed. And then 3, take no action.
Madam Chair,
if there's other questions or.
Second.
Okay, so I'm assuming that was option 1.
I'll move
Okay.
option 1.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Osborne to pass this recommendation. Yes, Director Day.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. There's a lot of good info, and while I support much of this, I'm not going to be able to give an affirmative vote. You'll hear this from me for a while, for the next few years. But the rate increase, I think, we're all concerned about inflationary pressures, and certainly our rate increases are not helping. And while the 5% rate increases is an on average rate increase, it's higher, and it's a higher compounded rate increase for a lot of people down the hill. And if you have a landscaped yard, if you have a large family, or you're not even a large family, just have a family living at home for the various reasons. So while I recognize the need to increase rates for investment in infrastructure, I think it's rate increases are too much too fast. Thank you.
I would like to make a comment also. It might be counter to what Director Day says, but we're not approving rate increases.
We are for next year.
We haven't confirmed them because those still come on in a second.
Actually, that's part of this, this option because they're built into the 2022.
Right.
So we can go back to the option.
Well,
No, we're actually asking the board to implement the previous 218 approved rate increases for only
Right.
2022.
so I just wanted to expand on that, where we also have 0 increase in wastewater.
Correct.
Which was one of the things that we did agree on. Yeah, which is good. But I agree with Director Day. It makes it a little hard for the people who have the full-blown bill. And
Well, what it does is really for the dual commodity customers, it's
Correct.
less than a 5% increase.
right, it doesn't, yeah, they don't have the full 5%. So, we need to move on and make sure we have this taken care of. But again, I just want to reiterate that we still have a 0 increase in wastewater. And that was one of my biggest problems when I first came on the board, is I was paying 6% for wastewater fees over the 4% that the water fee was. And so we have changed that. And that is because we have had a lot of dialogue on that one. But we still have a lot of projects ready to go, so.
Just to be clear, the 218 process identified the rate revenue requirement for water based on our forecasted infrastructure needs and PAYGO projects. The 218 process also determined that the rate revenue requirements for wastewater at this time were not needed, and we recommended to the board, I think it's 001, 2, and 3, or something like that. So it was all based on a calculated rate revenue requirement as we forecasted what's required not only in operating expenses, but capital improvement plans. So it was justified on those infrastructure improvements going on.
Right. All right. Any public comment?
President Anzini, it does not appear there is any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 13, the adoption of the 2021-2022 mid-cycle operating budget and 2022 and 2026 financial plan, along with the implementation of the rate increase, the 5% rate increase for 2022 water and recycled water, 0 for wastewater.
Okay, so this is your opportunity to vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, and 4 voting aye. Division 5 voting no. Motion carries.
All right, we'll move on to item number 14.
President Anzini?
Yes.
This item is just a housekeeping item. We don't have a prepared presentation. The reason why it's on action is because it cannot be adopted until after the budget is adopted.
Move 14.
Second.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that comment.
Nice presentation, Tony, very good.
We're keeping your record solid.
We're calling for public
Right.
comment on action item number 14, option 1, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Veerkamp.
Correct. So,
President Anzini, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 14.
okay. So therefore, board members vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we're now on to item number 16.
Madam Chair, I'll move item 15 for approval.
Okay, it's been motioned to approve item number 16.
I'll second that.
Okay, Director Day seconded.
For clarification, it's action item number 15.
I'm sorry, 15.
Option 1, moved by Director Veerkamp and
Yes.
seconded by Director Day. At this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 15, option 1.
Yes, there is a question here.
I do have a question on this item. Stegall was the low bidder, 300-some thousand. The next lowest was 400, as I recall, and the next was in the 500,000 or 600,000. Do we have any history with this contractor?
Yes, we do. So
Is
they,
it good history?
It is. So they actually did the Moose Hall project just up the road from this, which is almost an identical project, so they have industry knowledge of the location. Additionally, the main reason that they're so much cheaper is they have their own in-house electrical group. So they actually have 3 guys that does their own electrical. So that significantly drive down they really have no subcontractors on this job.
Great.
Where TNT did. So
Thank
that's
you.
the cost.
Mr. Wilson, can you just state your name and position for the record, please?
Yeah, Patrick Wilson, senior engineer.
Thank you.
And one last call for the public comment for action item number 15. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay, therefore, board, go ahead and vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, now we move to item 16. Okay.
For the record, because Director Verkamp's microphone was not on, Director Verkamp has recused himself from action item number 16.
Correct.
And he will remain in the room, however, will not participate in the discussion or the vote.
All right.
I'm just going to pause for 1 second here. I apologize.
Alrighty, thank you, Jennifer. Hello, my name is Liz Carrington, Senior Civil Engineer here at the district. Today I'd like to present a construction contract and project funding for the Collections Relocation Project. Next slide, please. Right. Prior to 2018, the board authorized purchase and sale of Bass Lake to the CSD. Moving forward to the design, we have in June 2018, the board approved a contract for site design with GHD. Then back in January of 2020, the board adopted a mitigated negative declaration for the project and approved a contract with GHD for the building design. Next slide. Then back to the board in May of 2020, the board received an update regarding project status, and then staff came back a month later per the board's request to provide a cost analysis of the project alternatives. And then finally, back in November 2021, the board approved the current CIP, which included this project. Slide. To summarize this presentation, the collections facility at Bass Lake is being encroached upon by residential uses. In addition, the existing facility has reached the end of useful life. The district has sold the Bass Lake property to the Dorado Hills CSD, and the current intention is to relocate collection staff, equipment, vehicles, and materials, all to a lot adjacent to the Dorado Hills wastewater treatment plant. And to accommodate the relocation of staff, building and site improvements are necessary for current and future growth of the collections group. Right? Taking a step back, the collections group that currently resides at Bass Lake consists of 22 individuals that perform operations, maintenance, and emergency response to the district's sewer system based on the sewer system management plan adopted by the board. The sewer collection system includes 60 lift stations, over 400 miles of gravity pipe, and over 50 miles of force main pipe. Along with personnel, Bass Lake currently houses a variety of light and heavy-duty equipment and vehicles, tools and equipment, and construction materials. Next slide. All right. The facility itself at Bass Lake is a 45-year-old repurposed chemical storage building. This building has served us well, and it's now at the end of useful life. It's because of the age of original construction, we'll either need to do substantial upgrades or full-on replacement to make sure that the project or that the building is up to current building codes. And right now, most equipment and materials are stored outside, exposed to the elements, or in shipping containers sprinkled throughout the site. Next slide. All right, back in the 1990s, Bass Lake was well removed from residential uses, but now, fast forward 25 plus years later, we have a plethora of residential subdivisions on the west, east, and south side of the facility. You may put that again. Thank you. Sorry about that. So considering the age and condition, coupled with the encroaching residential uses, the district sought to sell the Bass Lake property to the El Dorado Hills CSD and relocate to a nearby vacant lot, trying to maximize the usage of current district properties. The lot adjacent to El Dorado Hills poses an ideal solution, just because the district will always be there to operate the plant. And also, half of the sewer customers are located in El Dorado Hills, so that really helps with our response time. Alrighty, next slide. All right, by relocating staff, there's several additional operational benefits. For one, consolidation of staff. So this is great for oversight and assistance to support our staff as they do their jobs out in the field. Efficient utilization of property that the district owns. We're able to sell surplus property and make use of the current lots that we have. Also, the improvements will now be able to store all of our materials and equipment properly in enclosed areas protected from the elements. Also, item number 4, so the current design incorporated a multi-purpose space for collections and fleet. So right now, we have a handful of fleet vehicles that are down on the eastern side of our service area, and so vehicles, when they need servicing, they come up to headquarters. And so now with this current design, we'll be able to have fleet staff go down to Bass Lake, service 4 or 5 vehicles all at once, and it's a great way to be efficient with our time. And lastly, by us being able to construct improvements at Bass Lake, our collections folks will be able to continue with their operation, no disruption to service, and so as soon as those improvements are done, it'll be a quick little swap over and we'll be good to go, business as usual. All right, next slide. And then I did want to touch on the purchase and sale agreement at Bass Lake. So this was authorized a handful of years ago, and currently we're in a leaseback agreement, and that spans until December of next year. All right. As far as the project scope, this project includes a building that'll be both warehouse and office staff, and so, office space. The top is the south-facing wall. Middle left, that is the east. Middle right is the west, and the bottom is the north-facing wall that's facing towards the treatment plant. I did want to note the roof line. So as we were looking at the design of how to put all these uses in one building, we looked at the office space, their height requirements and whatnot, and then we looked at the warehouse space. So because of those rolling doors, the covered canopy, we really had to elevate that roof line quite a bit. And so we found that just 2 feet more, we're able to put a whole second story above that office and locker space. And so I'll elaborate a little bit on that later in the presentation. All right, next slide. All right, so here we have the floor plan. The top is the loft/mezzanine area, and the bottom is that first level multi-use space. So when the design team was first getting together to put together the conceptual design, our intent was to replace functionality, not necessarily replace square footage. And so this is a little bit different than what we have at Bass Lake, but it's actually, the office space mirrors what our construction equipment, what our water construction folks have over at headquarters. And so we have one office for the site supervisor, and so that'll be facing the entrance as well as the yard. And then we have one office space for the leads to all share. And then we have a bull room for the remaining staff that they can come in, do their timesheets, do what they need to do, and then head back out in the field. On the other side of the hallway, we have the locker space and the restrooms. So due to current building code, we did have to expand that space a little bit, but I like to think of it as an overall wash with the efficiencies that were gained elsewhere. And then moving to the right of the floor plan, we have 3 roll-up doors. Those first 2, that's for loading of forklift weight materials, and so there's certain items that you can grab and go, certain items that need forklifts, and so we have an area designated for those heavier items. And then on the other side of the hall, we have area designated for the grab-and-go nozzles, hoses, all sorts of fun little tools. And then for that third bay, over on the right-hand side of the screen, we have 2 areas for mechanical collections staff, as well as our fleet maintenance staff. And so design this space where we can have floor-to-ceiling cabinetry for all of the gaskets, nuts and bolts and whatnot, everything that we'll need to service those pumps that are at our 60 lift stations out in the field. And then an area for covered loading for any parts that are delivered, pumps that need to come in, be protected from the elements, easy grab-and-go type stuff. And then I did want to close by I did also want to mention some of the aspects of the loft. So right now it's not designed for immediate continual occupancy. Really that space is for overflow for training, so CPR training for our field staff can occur in that space. Also, El Dorado Hills is a data center backup for our headquarters, and so this would be an excellent space for a backup EOC in case the need arises. Also, it's room for our collections to grow. So right now we have 22 staff. You know, we might grow eventually in the future, and so that's an excellent space to add more desks, whatnot, any displaced staff from headquarters, et cetera. Next slide. All right, now to discuss site improvements. So this site is the site plan transposed on the aerial view. We have Latrobe Road on the left-hand side of the screen. Our collections folks will enter through a improved entrance gate on the south side of the facility. We will have an asphalt drive aisle with a roundabout at the end to try to minimize those backup alarms that we have on all of our fleet vehicles. We do have an enlarged asphalt apron for loading of materials in and out of those material bays. We have a fuel island, the building, which is perpendicular to Latrobe Road. And then I did want to also mention we have a lot on the right-hand side of the screen, the eastern side of the property. That is graded for future use. So as we were going through this project, you know, definitely wanted to replace functionality, streamline it as much as we can, but keep our eyes out for future growth, future opportunities where we can identify areas for if we have additional equipment, goes right over here. All right. District staff employed an extensive outreach effort back in the environmental review phase of the project. Some of those efforts included an article on our waterfront, our project webpage, posts on our social media outlets, and 2 courtesy notices. The mailing list for those notices included 500 recipients. That was developed from the 1,000-foot boundary as required by our CEQA process, as well as any property owners that district staff identify that could have a view of the project. So district staff drove around Blackstone area, drove around nearby residences, and tried to find any folks that would have a view of our project. And so we wanted to let those folks know as well. Also, we did send a note to our Blackstone HOA folks. And then moving forward for our proposed construction outreach efforts, we'd like to mirror that as much as we can. So send out an updated courtesy notice to all of those 500 recipients, automatic email updates, update the project webpage, and post signs on the construction site for any folks driving by that are curious about the project. All right. In December of 2019, the El Dorado County Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit and MND for the project. Subsequently, district completed all necessary CEQA processes. Next slide. A request for qualifications was released back in March of this past year, and then construction documents were released in the fall. Bids were just received by 2 of the 4 pre-qualified bidders. Next slide. All right, low bid was DG Grenade at $4.6 million. Next highest was a little around $600,000 more. Next slide. And this project will also require some construction management and inspection services. We did an initial request for qualifications. 4 consultants were deemed qualified and 4 provided cost proposals. The reason the cost varied slightly is so staff developed a RFP with the tasks required, and we asked for hourly rates as well as hours that they deemed necessary. So this is not a typical district project for us, and so we were really eager to see what our folks out in the industry deemed as required for our construction management services. Ready? Next slide. This construction will require some additional contracts to get the job done. We'll need additional construction engineering services, specialty inspection for concrete, structural, and compaction. Also, we'll need to monitor the SWIP and do some pre-construction environmental surveys per the CEQA documentation. All right. Project schedule. All right, so this schedule was developed based off of normal construction environments. Right now, we are seeing an unprecedented delays in material supply chain issues. So, this will be definitely our goal, and we'll try our best to meet the December 22 goal, but things sometimes happen outside of our control, so do our best. All right, funding requests. So ultimately, we're requesting $5,708,006. The construction contract, that's the big ticket item for $4.6 million. Construction management inspection for $260. Capitalized labor at $250. Some supporting contracts totaling $115,500, and then a project contingency of $500,000. All right, board option. Option 1, award contracts to DG Grenade Inc. in the not-to-exceed amount of $4,602,436 for construction, and ICM Group in the not-to-exceed amount of $260,070 for construction management and inspection of the project, and approve additional funding in the amounts of $250,000 for capitalized labor, $115,500 for associated consulting services, and $500,000 in project contingencies, for a total funding request of $5,708,006 for the collections relocation project. All right, board options. Options 2, take other action. Option 3, take no action. Our recommendation is option 1 today.
Any questions from the board?
I'll move option 1.
All right. Anybody seconding it? Okay.
I will not be seconding it.
Okay.
I'll explain why.
Well, I'm just going to make a premise, that, a proclamation. We started this process 3 or 4 years ago, and everybody agreed that we needed to do this and consolidate our operations and to get them down to the treatment plant. And I think we should all follow through, even though the costs are more than we had anticipated. Our lease runs out in a year, and I think we need to just press on and do what we need to do. I mean, even though I think we maybe ended up with a few bucks more than we anticipated, but anyway, I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne. Now we can comment.
Yeah, just a comment. And I think George knows where I'm going on this. When we started this, and I grant you the initial estimate was a back of the envelope estimate, and it was going to be a few $100,000 to shift the guys over. And then a more realistic estimate, around $1 million, came in, but a lot of that was going to be covered by the sale of the Bass Lake property. And then since then, it's just continued to, well, since we're at this, let's go ahead and improve that, and so on. And it's then $2 million, and then $4 million, and now we're nearly at $6 million. And we never, I think at some point we casually discussed, well, what about keeping everything at Bass Lake? Well, that's going to cost $2 million. That would be too much. Well, maybe it wouldn't have been. And maybe we should have taken the time to look more seriously at it. And I'm responsible for that part of that as well. I certainly don't think, had I known these costs, that I would have continued to vote for this. And I think we made a very large mistake in not doing a full analysis of keeping everybody there. So those are my comments, and I think my vote will be reflective of that.
Okay, Director Dwyer.
Yes, I'd like to say if we're going to do things, we should do them right. And I think this is doing it the right way. We could hodgepodge and put temporary shelters, and I think that the collections group is so important to our district business, and we are so vulnerable in collections to environmental issues and health issues that it's important to do this right. The other thing I'd like to point out is, it was at the bottom of the chart and Elizabeth didn't emphasize it, but this is all paid for with FCCs, facility capacity charges by developers and new hookups. So this is not a burden on the ratepayer per se, this is a burden on future development.
Point made. I appreciate Director Dwyer's comments. This was one of the things, as you said, Director Day, that 2-3 years ago, we were looking at a smaller amount. But we also are reflecting that a coordinated effort between the El Dorado's Hills Community Services District, who wanted to make the Bass Lake a park-like, and they made a good set effort. I was on the committee. I think you were on the committee when we met with them. It's always an unknown factor, but that was 3 years ago, and the cost of construction I just have a lot of background experience when East Bay Mud did a major change like this, and it was real difficult for the employees at the time, but once they consolidated into one area, there was more of a teamwork effort. Actually, when you look at the Bass Lake facilities right now, it's not organized. And I think that somewhere along the line, once this shift happens, that there will be savings in travel time. There will be savings in training opportunities for the employees at a new place. There's also a part of morale that happens in your working environment. So I see there's things that it may seem expensive, and it is being paid for by FCC, which we're always juggling these little walnut shells around on trying to figure out what's the tug and the pull. I think the really important part that concerns me, and I want to make sure that effort is happening, that the neighborhood is well-versed and understanding. I mean, we may have done those things, but it was a couple years ago. And we want to reinforce our connection with the community, especially the Blackstone area, because that is impacting them. And to the point where, like I said, we need another dog and pony show once this passes, that effort is happening. And like I said, as an employee in a water industry that was separated in different areas, when you centralize your staff, the staff works better, the management works better, and people are basically, you have to kind of shift. And right now, the Bass Lake site, to me, is not an appropriate place. So, all right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the way this was originally pitched back when was this was going to be a win-win in the sense of that we can help out the CSD and move these radial facilities and away from the Bass Lake area. It'd be nice park and all that stuff, but it was pitched as it was going to be close to a break-even for us. It's clearly way, way beyond that. It isn't. However the funds are generated, it's still our people's money. The main point I want to make is that we didn't really fully analyze whether we should have kept it there, and I think maybe it would have ended up costing less. And yes, there's development around Bass Lake, but there's lots of development around a treatment facility, so that's really not a factor in my head. So it's just that, unfortunately, incrementalism, we just kept going further and further. The cost just kept going, and part of it is today's construction cost, but part of it too is because it's going to be a phenomenal project. It's going to be awesome, but that wasn't how we were looking at it from the beginning, and we should have fully analyzed the costs of keeping it there and just renovating the facilities.
Point made. Thank you. All right. Is there any public comment?
At this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 16. Option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne.
Nope, okay. Therefore, board members, please vote. And that's because Director Veerkamp has abstained. right?
Recused himself.
Recused himself.
He recused, I
Right.
abstain.
You abstain. Oh,
Division 1,
Splitting the difference.
you.
for action item number 16, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne, with Director Veerkamp recusing himself. He remained in the room, however, did not participate in the discussion or the vote. I will call the vote. Division 1, 2, and 4 voting aye. Division 5 abstaining. Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our last action item on the agenda. The fleet always come up near the end, don't they?
Everybody leaves.
We gotta put them last so they can make sure everybody gets out for the day.
Madam Chair, I would move option 1.
Okay, we have one,
The item
item 1,
explains itself very well.
action 1.
I'll second that.
And
I do-
Director Day is seconding it.
I do have a question.
At least introduce yourself.
Yeah, okay. My name's Greg Royal. I'm the new Fleet and Building Maintenance Supervisor.
All right, welcome.
Well, no, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So,
Well done.
how has the current new vehicle shortage, chip shortage and all that stuff,
Right.
and markups over sticker and all that, how does that impact you in this
It's
situation?
very tough right now.
Yeah.
It's very huge, and we have to look way further ahead than we used to because the market's not there for the vehicles. Our big trucks, you order today, they might not build for 3 years.
Wow.
And so we have to really start, planning ahead for what's to come, and same thing with parts. Unfortunately, with our older vehicles, it's very hard to get the stuff we need to keep them running. So,
Correct. Well, welcome to the district.
thank you very much. Oh, yes, we are planning to come in January for another round of another, we have quite a bit of stuff that we're trying to push forward and keep the fleets going and reliable, and so we will be back for more.
A lot of that is because of the long lead time. Let's get the orders in, otherwise we have
I do have a
vehicles that aren't
question.
working.
Yes, Director Osborne.
What is a Cell-C crane? Never heard of that term before.
Under there, that's our water construction. They have the cranes on the back of the trucks for them to be able to lift.
Oh, it's nothing unique or
Nothing
anything?
unique, just a crane for them to lift the
Oh,
valves
okay.
into the back of the truck. Yeah.
I have to say that I think by piggybacking on the state contract, we got a pretty good deal on these vehicles. 4x4 pickup trucks for $24,000 is pretty good number. I bet, Alan, you'd probably like to buy some of those, wouldn't you?
No, that's not allowed.
And we found another source too that I've been looking into, and it expands our being able to buy any type of vehicle too throughout that contract, and they kind of have their own attachment to it, so we could get the big trucks all the way down to cars as we replace through the state bid contract now. So
Yeah, and I think to Director Dwyer's point, the contract, the big, I don't know the correct terminology for it, but we're picking back off the state's contract. We were able to get those prices, which I think is important, because otherwise, everything can be 10 or 15,000 over sticker.
Oh, yeah,
It's
definitely.
ridiculous.
Yeah. And we actively check too on our end to make sure that it is lower. So we get quotes outside of that contract also, just to verify.
Right.
So that we always stay ahead of the game on that. So.
Right.
So after we have a first and a second, any more questions?
I just, for the record, I just wanted to mention that even though Mr. Royal is new to this position, it was an internal promotion, and he has been with the district for some time.
Well, you're at the podium now. All right. So are there any questions from the public regarding this? No?
Public comment for action item number 17, option 1, moved by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Day.
Right.
President Anzini, at this time, it does not appear any of the members of the public are wishing to speak.
Okay. Board members, please vote. Okay.
No. I'm sorry, folks. Can you please revote?
All right.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
And in the future, someday, I want to hear something about electric cars.
Will do.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll give it to Brian, our,
President Anzini, the next item on our agenda today are 2 closed session matters, both agendized and described on today's agenda. I anticipate that board's consideration of these 2 items will require at least 30 minutes.
and there will be action coming out.
There may not be, and I will report on any reportable action after the closed
Okay.
session.
Thank you very much. So this concludes the public meeting, or suspends the public meeting until after our closed meeting.
For the purposes of this meeting, this webinar will be shut down. We will be going into closed session and not returning until 12:45. However, it could potentially be after, and at that time, I will reopen the public portion of the meeting.
President Inzini, to conclude today's meeting, I'd just like to report out on the 2 closed sessions. Under closed session A, the board met and conferred with its labor negotiators and provided direction but took no reportable action. On closed session B, again, the board met with its real property negotiators and provided direction but took no reportable action. There is one clarification that I'd like to make to the agenda's description of the parcel on closed session B, and that is, during the course of the board's discussion, I was informed that the parcel number agendized for closed session consideration needs one additional number, and so the clarified number should read APN Assessor's Parcel Number 105-210-030. The addition being the 0 in the last 3 digits. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the board to look at the tentatively scheduled items for future meetings. Certainly direct any kind of concerns towards the general manager. Everybody conclude, so motion for adjournment?
We don't have any.
Don't have to. I'm in control. Okay, so the meeting is closed.
Just
Do it.